तो हमारे दर्शकों का स्वागत है आज की नई स्ट्रीम में, जो है ओरिजिन ऑफ टू नेशन थ्योरी। और उसमें जो है सर सैयद अहमद खान और अलीगढ़ मूवमेंट का क्या रोल था, जो कि एंड में पाकिस्तान बना। तो इसके लिए मैं जो है रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा वीबी दादा को। वीबी दादा प्रणाम। और मैं
बीबी दादा
उनको,
तो है। हाँ, बीबी दादा तो है
सॉरी,
नहीं, उनकी
एम
जगह पे
दादा,
मैं हूँ।
एम
हाँ
दादा,
हाँ हाँ।
एम
जी,
दादा को
बहुत बहुत
रिक्वेस्ट
धन्यवाद
करूंगा।
मौका देने के लिए। बहुत बहुत
नमस्कार दादा।
धन्यवाद। दर्शकों को भी नमस्कार, धन्यवाद जिन लोग
तो
सुन रहे हैं।
अब
मैं कोशिश
अब
करूंगा कि
मैं
जितना मुझसे हो सके मैं पढ़कर बताता हूँ।
अब बिना
जी
समय
जी।
व्यर्थ करे मैं जो है इसको ले जाऊंगा कंटेंट पे और इसको दिखाते हैं। ज्यादा विजिबिलिटी कैसी है? मैं थोड़ा नीचे करके एक
ए-
बार दिखा दूं।
ए- एकदम सही है जी, एकदम
सही है,
सही है। हाँ जी।
ठीक है।
तो शुरू करता हूँ जी।
शुरू करिए दादा।
Syed Ahmed Khan, the Aligarh movement and the two-nation theory. This is the tomb of Syed Ahmed Khan, founder of the Aligarh Muslim University, inside the university campus. So Syed Ahmed Khan was the founder of the Aligarh movement. He was a product of the Delvi's seminary, Madrasa-e-Rahmiya, at the time of his helmsmanship by Shah Muhammad Ishaq Delvi and his brother Yaqub. Now, these two characters are very important here. The movement was started by Shah Muhammad Ishaq Delvi and his brother Yaqub, whom we'll come to know about later. Therefore, the author writes, I'm sorry, first we should have given some introduction regarding the book. We are quoting from India, Bharat and Pakistan, isn't it? By Indian sir, am I right? We are quoting from the book written by J. Sai Deepak, titled
यस,
India,
इट इज
Bharat and
फ्रॉम,
Pakistan.
यस, इंडिया भारत एंड पाकिस्तान, बुक बाय जे साई दीपक।
Ji, ji. So the author is writing that therefore, at the very least, this can be said with confidence that Syed Ahmad Khan had been exposed to the thoughts and worldview of Delvi and his successors. In the light of this, a few pertinent questions arise which must be cogently answered. First is there any basis to suggest that exposure to Delvi's worldwide view also meant that Syed Ahmad Khan agreed with the same? If yes, how does one reconcile his subscription to Delvi's views and his introduction of a marked greater proportion of Western education than in other Islamic institutions as a part of the curriculum for Muslim youth in the institution he founded? Is it possible to conclude, on the basis of his formulations of the two-nation theory, that it was but a restatement and repackaging of Delvi's views in a modern idiom through the prism of the nation state prevalent during his own life and times? Now, this question is very important. So, here we come to know for the first time that the two-nation theory was propagated by Delvi and his team, the person whom we talked about earlier. So, now Syed Ahmad Khan is expanding the theory. So the author asks a very pertinent question, whether it's a restatement or repackaging of Delhi's views in a modern idiom through the prism of the nation state prevalent during his own life and times. Then the author writes, after all, European or Western political thought was quite well entrenched by them, as demonstrated in the first book of this trilogy. He's speaking about trilogy because there are three books of his. So he's referring to it as a trilogy. In this chapter, the author says, I will attempt to address these questions with evidence and draw reasonable inferences as far as possible, based on the theory of evolution of pan-Islamic movements in the Bharatiya subcontinent. This much is clear. This movement that started in the immediate aftermath of the loss of Muslim state power in the 18th and 19th centuries were more reactionary and visibly anti-colonial. since the British, along with Hindus and Sikhs, were seen as usurpers. This is very important. Seen as usurpers of Muslim-ruled territory or Darul Islam. The first response was to launch physical jihad against the Sikh Empire and thereafter against the British establishment, as exemplified by the Wahhabis under Syed, Ahmed, Barelvi and the Ali brothers. Their course of action was in fact consistent with the teachings of Islam, which mandate jihad from within to restore the status of a territory to Dar al-Islam, or require emigration, hijrat, to a Dar al-Islam, so that the practice of Islam is not interfered with and jihad may be launched from the outside with the support of Muslim states. The second response was to return to traditional centers of Islamic learning and convergence to reform Islam and prepare it for reclamation of state power, as and when the atmospherics were conducive. The inability of the Wahhabis to militarily dislodge the British convinced the proponents of this school of thought that this course of action was the more pragmatic one. This was a conscious decision taken to deal with the changed realities, as evident from the decision of the committee formed by Shah Muhammad Ishaq Delvi under the stewardship of Maulana Mamluk Ali Nanavtawi. However, this school of thought witnessed a gradual change. The first wave of conservative movements, such as the Ahl-e-Hadith, the Ahl-e-Quran, Deoband and Barelvi movements, focused more on traditional Islamic learning, defining a true Muslim, and observing political quietude by remaining aloof towards the colonial power structure and rejecting Western education. So there were other movements like the Ahli Hadith, the Ahli Quran, Deobandi and Barelvi movements. Some of us know about this. Those who don't know, these are separate sort of sects of Islam which are prevalent in this country and which are prevalent in the subcontinent, like in the India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and in some other places also. So those movements were aloof towards the colonial power structure and rejected Western education. Now, very cleverly, Syed Ahmed Khan tried to take up Western education, and using the colonial power structure, he tried to superimpose his own thoughts regarding true Islam, contrary to what these other four schools of thought had tried to achieve. Now, the statement which I made earlier, this is attested to by both Barbara Metcalfe and Ayesha Jalal in their respective books. This rectitude had direct consequences. A significant cross-section of Hindus learned English and became part of the colonial infrastructure, either because it gave them an opportunity to play a role in the process of governing their country while retaining the Indic consciousness, or because they were taken in by European coloniality. On the other hand, a significant cross-section of Muslims refused to learn English and lagged behind, but retained their Middle Eastern consciousness. And this Middle Eastern consciousness is still reflected by them. Perhaps this could be the subject of a case study for those interested in understanding the relationship between language, semantics, education, and consciousness. Now, the Middle Eastern consciousness is the Wahhabi school of thought. As time went by, some members of the Muslim community realized that the policy of self-imposed isolationism and sectarian rivalry operated to the detriment of the community, since it resulted in cession of political space to Hindus, but which hurt the Muslim collective memory as the former rulers of Hindustan. Therefore, the community gradually opened itself to Western education, starting with significant regional efforts by the Muslim leaders of Bengal in the 1850s and 1860s. This was, of course, in response to the increased political awareness and consciousness of the Hindus of Bengal, who had embraced English education early on and had become part of the colonial power structure, something that had been hitherto either not possible or not easy under the Muslim establishment. In this sense, Bengali Hindus were perhaps ahead of the rest of the country in pressing into service the political awarenessness, one which eventually gave birth to Indian nationalism. The Muslims of Bengal too therefore aspired to become part of the colonial infrastructure. This meant that well before the crystallization of the two-nation theory by Syed Ahmed Khan, both Hindus and Muslims typically established distinct community-specific institutions in the realms of education, culture, and politics, which underscores the tenuous and synthetic nature of the so-called syncretic culture. Among the earliest modern Muslim organizations to be established by the Muslims of Bengal was the Mohammedan Association in Calcutta in 1856, followed by the Mohammedan Literary Society in 1863 by Nawab Abdul Latif, a Sunni, who would go on to support the efforts of Syed Ahmed Khan, and the Central National Mohammedan Association founded in Calcutta by Syed Amir Ali, a Shia, in 1877, who would play a huge role in the would play a huge role in the founding of the Muslim League and beyond. So Syed Amir Ali, a Shia, in 1857, played a huge role in founding the Muslim League and beyond. Of these, Nawab Abdul Latif not only initiated efforts to foster understanding between the Muslims in Bengal and the British establishment, but also worked towards containment of the Wahhabi influence in East Bengal to placate the British. He invited influential Sunni ulema such as Maulvi Karamat Ali Jaunpuri to declare that India was not Dar al-Harb under the Christian British government. Interestingly, Maulvi Jaunpuri was a disciple of Syed Ahmad Barelvi, who had worked towards spreading the message of Wahhabism or Tariqa-i Muhammadiyya in Bengal, albeit through non-violent means. To support his British loyalist position further, Nawab Abdul Latif, may you kindly close, yes, thank you, cited British support to the Ottoman Empire in the Crimean War against the Russian Empire, the cordial relations between the British and the Ottoman Egypt, and the dependence of the Amir of Afghanistan on the British. He even obtained a fatwa from the Mufti of Mecca that Bharat was Dar al-Islam under the British, and had 5,000 copies of the fatwa distributed among Muslims in Bengal through the Mohammedan Literary Society. In 1877, for his promotion of English education among Muslims, he was bestowed with the title of Khan Bahadur by the British. सर यहाँ कुछ आप बोलना चाहेंगे सर, जैसे ये दारुल हर्ब और दारुल इस्लाम का कॉन्सेप्ट?
दादा यही वाला तो टू नेशन थ्योरी का बेस है।
हाँ, तो थोड़ा सा दर्शकों जिन लोगों को पता ना हो थोड़ा सा समझा दें आप तो बेहतर होगा सर, एक लाइन में। अब देखिए अंग्रेजों को भी कैसे बेवकूफ बनाएंगे। फतवा भी लिया गया मुफ्ती ऑफ मक्का से कि भारत दारुल इस्लाम है अंडर द ब्रिटिश।
जी दादा ये यही तो बाइनरी है, दारुल हर्ब दारुल इस्लाम।
अब पाकिस्तान जब बनी तो वो हो गया दारुल इस्लाम, और हमारा जो भारत है वो दारुल हर्ब है अभी, अभी। तो इनका प्रयास यही है कि हम लोग कैसे कितने जल्दी भारत को इस्लामाइज बनाए। जी जी जी,
ये सिंपल फंडा है बिल्कुल, कोई इसमें रॉकेट साइंस नहीं है दादा, बाइनरीज होती हैं इस्लाम में, कोई वो नहीं है। सेकेंडली आपने ये देखा होगा कि इट्स रेदर देन जस्ट अ रिलीजन, इट इज अ पॉलिटिकल आइडियोलॉजी
एंड अ मूवमेंट। जी जी,
हाँ मतलब इस्लाम जो है इसका पॉलिटिक्स से लेना देना, आप देखिए कहीं भी जाओगे आपको इनका पॉलिटिक्स में इन्वॉल्वमेंट मिलेगा, ठीक है।
लेकिन अपने मिशन को आगे बढ़ाने के लिए,
हाँ बाकी आप बाकी जैन को देखोगे, बुद्ध को देखोगे, हिंदू रिलीजियस लीडर्स को देखोगे, इनका पॉलिटिक्स
जी
से
जी
कोई लेना देना नहीं होता।
बिल्कुल जी। In the
जी दादा,
United
कंटिन्यू
Provinces,
करो।
northwestern Punjab provinces, the Aligarh movement, which began in the 1860s, and the Nadwatul Ulama movement of the 1890s, took upon themselves the responsibility of imparting Islamic and Western education to the Muslim youth, each, of course, in varying proportions. The Aligarh movement and its institutions were deemed too Western and British loyalists by many within the Muslim community, despite the movement's contributions to the creation of a national Muslim identity. In fact, some of its founding members, such as Shibli Nomani, later moved to the Darul Uloom Nadwatul Ulama. Now, these are all groups, citing the Aligarh establishment pro-Western tendencies which were reflected in its educational model. Now, Syed Ahmed Khan very cleverly, as I said, tried to superimpose the Western, the Islamic concept in a Western educational model, contrary to what the others were doing. So some of them went away, distanced themselves from the from Syed Ahmad Khan and went away to their original tendencies. Sahi sir, the Deobandis in particular shared this grievance against the Aligarh model. देखिए देवबंदी लोग भी didn't like the Aligarh model. With a view to tip the balance and increase the Islamic quotient in the education of Muslim youth, institutions such as the Darul Ulum, Natwatul Ulama, and the Jamia Millia Islamia were later established in 1898 and 1820 respectively. तो दो ये अलग संस्था बनाई गई, इनसे अलग होकर के सैयद अहमद खान से अलग होकर के ये बनाई, क्योंकि उनको लगा कि ये वेस्टर्न एजुकेशन मॉडल जो है ये हमारा वामी मूवमेंट के लिए सही नहीं है. They are giving too much of prominence to the British system of education. Despite all the criticism leveled against it by Muslims from different backgrounds for their own reasons, the fact remains that the Aligarh movement was the first national Muslim movement to embrace modernity and institutionally combine it with Islamic. जी
हाँ दादा, रावण दादा
नमस्कार जी.
नमस्कार.
नमस्कार नमस्कार.
नमस्कारम.
हाँ, मैंने कहा दादा का पहले स्वागत कर लूं, फिर आगे बढ़ाता हूँ.
जी जी जी
पढ़ के पहले खत्म करो, बाद में हम लोग
जी
बकवास
जी जी
करेगा.
or Islam oriented education. In this sense, the impact of the movement was wider compared with the efforts of the Muslim leaders of Bengal, although the latter were the pioneers in combining Islam with English education. Critically, Syed Ahmad Khan, although a self-confessed Wahhabi, established institutions catering to both Sunnis and Shias, as we shall see, which made possible the creation of a national Muslim identity beyond sectarian divides. देखिए कितना क्लेवर आदमी था. Sectarian divides को खत्म करने के लिए created such a concept that a national Muslim identity would prevail. This was because the Aligarh model was a consequence of the founders' realization or belief that this was to be the way of the future. In other words, Syed Ahmad Khan believed that if the goals of the white vision had to be realized, an Islamic environment was needed, where Islamic learning could be combined with Western education to produce individuals who could navigate the colonial state and the modern world to reclaim Muslim state power. Clearly, it was a pragmatic decision to operate within the European paradigm, but with clear objective of pushing the goals articulated by Shah Waliullah Dehlvi. In this sense, it was a post-colonial approach of subverting the Western paradigm. It's paradigm. Sorry.
Paradigm.
I'm mispronouncing it. I'm sorry. It's paradigm. By using the Western framework itself to meet Islamic ends. This is what distinguished the Aligarh movement from its predecessor or even other contemporary movements. Additionally, where's it gone? Since it contributed to the creation of Pakistan through Syed Ahmed Khan's exposition of the two-nation theory, to say that Delvi's goal was achieved, at least in part, would be incorrect, since according to Delvi, the whole of Bharatiya subcontinent belonged to Islam. No wonder Jinnah called Aligarh the Muslim arsenal of India, so much so that in 1939 he named Aligarh Muslim University as one of the primary beneficiaries in his will. It is important to understand that while Syed Ahmed Khan was the progenitor of the Aligarh movement, it also attracted several individuals who would build on the two-nation theory, either as part of the movement or through the founding of their own institutions and political parties. Therefore, this movement needs to be dealt with in some detail, especially in view of the fact that the partition of Bengal in 1905 on religious lines and the founding of the All India Muslim League in 1906 were temporarily proximate to the Aligarh movement and in many ways were effects of the movement itself. That apart, as pointed out earlier, the Aligarh movement also contributed to the Khilafat and Pakistan movement. Therefore, for the sake of continuity in the narrative in this chapter, the author limits the discussion on the Aligarh movement primarily to Syed Ahmed Khan and his formulation of the two-nation theory. The contribution of the movement subsequent to Khan's death in 1898 will be discussed wherever necessary in the next two sections as part of the later backdrop of the tectonic events that took place between 1899 and 1924. Origins and early influences. In Islamic revival in British India, Deoband, 1860-1900, Barbara Metcalfe traces the lineage and moorings of Syed Ahmed Khan. Born in 1817, he came from a family that had strong ties to the Naqshbandi order of Sufis. We might recall that Delvi too belonged to the same order, despite his hardline positions against the Sufi mysticism and his dilution of the position of the Quran and Hadith in the practice of Islam. Metcalfe unambiguously states the following on Delvi's impact on Syed Ahmed Khan's worldview. Syed Ahmed Khan's family, especially on his mother's side, had deep ties in the line of Naqshbandi Mujaddidi that was represented in Delhi by Shah Ghulam Ali in 1824. This line had been known for its commitment to sobriety in the Sufi path. Commitment to sobriety in the Sufi path. Ghulam Ali was considered even more strict than Shah Abdul Aziz in opposing customary practices. He, however, did not share Abdul Aziz's concern with reaching beyond the spiritual elite. Syed Ahmed was clearly influenced by the moral and spiritual vitality of both lines and by the popular concerns of the Wali-Ilahi line as well. According to Aziz Ahmed, Syed Ahmed received some schooling in the Naqshbandi Khanak of Shah Ghulam Ali, which conformed to religious orthodoxy as much as his second school run by the disciples of Shah Abdul Aziz, where the reformist neo-Wahhabi traditions of Shah Waliullah or Allah flourished. Syed Ahmed Khan's maternal relatives were disciples of Shah Abd al-Aziz, and his own mother was a devout and learned lady. This is the picture of him sitting in the middle. Aziz Ahmed confirms that it was in Delvi's seminary that Syed Ahmed Khan imbibed the principles which were already being preached by Shah Ismail and others of purifying Indian Islam from practices borrowed from other religions. Therefore, the impact of the Delvite worldview on Syed Ahmed Khan is undeniable. In the life and work of Syed Ahmed Khan, G.F.I. Graham also considered Khan as his close friend and even translated his books from Urdu to English. wrote that Khan's paternal and maternal ancestors were men of mark under the Mughal dynasty, not empire. Khan's father, Syed Ahmed Taqi, who was a close friend of the then Mughal Emperor Akbar II, was offered prime ministership, which he declined. After Taqi's death in 1836, the then and last Mughal Emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, bestowed upon Syed Ahmed Khan the titles of his grandfather and additional titles. No wonder Babra Metcalf makes it abundantly clear that Syed Ahmed Khan was accurately sensitive to the loss of Mughal power and was keen on restoring the pride of the Muslim ruling class and nobility, a vision consistent with Delvi's. In 1837, Khan entered British service in the criminal department at the sub-judge's office in Delhi. In 1847, while still in the employ of the British, in his first book, Asarus Sanadid, he was all praise for the jihad undertaken by Shah Ismail Delvi and Syed Shahid Barelvi. He hailed Shah Ismail Delvi as the extirpator of heresy, Kami al-Biddat, and extolled the jihad of the Wahhabis under him against the Sikh empire as follows. The worshippers of God have not till today relinquished his cause. Every year, the Mujahids, holy warriors, go from different native places for the jihad, and the merit of this good work will forever reach his soul. Prior to the mutiny of 1857, the so-called modern Islamic reformer subscribed to traditional Islamic positions, even in matters of science, as evidenced by his monograph of 1850 titled Qawli Matin Dar Ibtal-i Harakat-i-Zameen, firm assertion with regard to the false motion of the earth, wherein he denied the earth's rotation. Given his family's proximity to the Mughal dynasty, his training in the Delvite school of thought, and his unambiguous Quranic views on matters of science, it is not possible to believe that the two-nation theory was an aberration from Khan's central worldview. On the contrary, it was entirely consistent with it, as we shall see, and any statement made by Khan to the contrary at any point in his life must, in fact, be seen as his pragmatism at work, which made no difference to the Delhite end goal. This pragmatism is evident from the fact that when the Wahhabis started directing their jihad towards the British after the latter's annexation of Punjab, Khan could no longer afford to be as open in his adulation of the Wahhabis. Therefore, he redacted the above extracted paragraph from the very same book in 1854, Rebellion, Reformation and Reincarnation. It was only after the mutiny of 1857 when Syed Ahmed Khan realized the Muslims could not compete with the British owing to the latter's superior organization and technological prowess that he adopted a more realistic position. Pertinently, he lost a few family members to the British response to the mutiny, pointing to a significant degree of personal investment in the causes he espoused thereafter. It was between 1857 and 1870 that Khan's role as the modern defender of Islam was shaped better, which manifested broadly in three ways: defense of the Muslim community, defense of Islam, and the mainstreaming of Western education in the Muslim community through an Anglo-Islamic model. On the subject of defending the Muslim community from the ire of the British, Syed Ahmed Khan felt that Muslims were being unfairly singled out for their participation in the mutiny, so much so that he even contemplated moving to Egypt. Both Aisha Jalal in a book Partisans of Allah, Jihad in South Asia, and M.S. Jain in his comprehensive monograph titled The Aligarh Movement, Its Origin and Development, 1858 to 1906 say as much, while Metcalf claims that he contemplated moving to Hijaz in Arabia, following in the footsteps of his teacher, Shah Muhammad Ishaq Delvi. However, he chose to stay on, and through his writings, such as Causes of the Indian Revolt, which was originally published in Urdu in 1858 as Ashbabi Bagawat, and the Loyal Mohammedans of India, 1860, he sought to build a defense for Muslims of Bharat by advancing two specific positions: that Muslim participation in the mutiny was not religious but political, arising out of British attitudes and policies, specifically non-admission of natives in the Legislative Council; that Hindus and Muslims alike feared imposition of Christianity by the British establishment, and that majority of the Muslims in Bharat were otherwise loyal to the British despite British excesses. On the first count, he was factually incorrect. In the light of the express call for jihad and restoration of the Mughal rule given by the Muslim mutineers, the following is an extract on the subject from Yusuf Abbasi's book. Maulvi Inayat Ali preached jihad to some of the Indian troops. Maulana Fazali Haq Kharabadi was one of the ulema who drafted the fatwa declaring the struggle of 1857 to be a jihad. Muslim leaders like Bakht Khan considered it imperative to give a religious and legal basis to the struggle against the British. Consequently, a meeting of the prominent ulema was convened in Delhi, and they issued a fatwa calling upon every Muslim to stand up in arms against the British. Henceforth, religious, political, and military leadership was centered in Delhi, which assumed its old symbolic character in the Muslim national sentiment. The cry of jihad rang all over the subcontinent, and the Muslim people from Delhi to Madras were stirred to action by the lofty sentiment of this call. Not surprising, therefore, to find the green-robed mujahids of Bareilly rushing at the English guns and bayonets with the cries of Deen Deen Bismillah, or to witness them fighting to the last on the ramparts of Delhi. The ulema were no idle scholars excelling in the art of religious disputation, but men cast in heroic mold, who set a shining example in courage as well as learning. The saga of valor and martyrdom, of exile and imprisonment, of trials and tribulation, inscribed in the blood and sufferings of ulema like Ahmadullah, Imdadullah, Abdul Jalil, Liaquat Ali, Kafi, Pir, Ali, Ghulam Hussain, and others during the eventful year of the uprising and after, shall ever remain a source of inspiration for freedom fighters. However, the heroic resistance of the ulema ended in a defeat which shattered their political leadership. In the light of these facts, it is not possible to contend that Muslim participation in the mutiny was purely political. Importantly, even Syed Ahmed Khan did not refute the fact that calls for jihad were indeed issued at the time. His sole disagreement was that the calls were without Islamic basis and hence invalid. He argued against the use of jihad under colonial rule, but not against jihad itself, since according to him, Muslims of the subcontinent had no right to wage war against the British as long as the religious freedoms were not interfered with. The following were Khan's views on the subject. Here, he simultaneously made the point that jihad against the British was unjustified, whereas the Wahhabi jihad against the Sikhs was justified. There are again no grounds for supposing that the Mohammedans had for a long time been conspiring or plotting a simultaneous rise or a religious crusade against the professors of different faith. The English government did not interfere with the Mohammedans in the practice of their religion. For this sole reason, it is impossible that the idea of a religious crusade should have been entertained. 35 years ago, a celebrated Maulavi, Muhammad Ismail by name, preached a religious crusade in Hindustan and called upon all men to aid him in carrying it on. But on that occasion, he distinctly stated that natives of Hindustan, subject to the British government, could not conscientiously take part in a religious war within the limits of Hindustan. Accordingly, while thousands of jihadis congregated in every district of Hindustan, there was no sort of disturbance raised within British territory. Going northwards, these men crossed the Punjab border and waged war in those parts of the country. And even if we were to imitate the know-nothings in the various districts and call the late disturbance a religious war, it is very certain that no preparations were made for it before the 10th of May, 1857. The Maulvi Muhammad Ismail, referred to in the above extract from Causes of the Indian Revolt, was a reference to Shah Ismail Delvi, whom Khan had celebrated in 1847 as the extirpator of heresy. Khan's position was glaringly inconsistent, since in the very same book he cited interference with the religion of the natives as one of the primary causes of the mutiny, which provides us material basis to conclude that the Muslim mutineers had indeed launched a jihad to protect the religious freedom in accordance with the tenets of Islam. In fact, on the subjects of proselytizing push by the Christian colonial establishment, triggering the mutiny, which I dealt with in detail in my first book, I agree with Khan. The following is an extract on Christian colonial conduct from Khan's book, Causes of the Indian Revolt, which unfortunately still resonates with the current evangelical realities in Bharat. जी इंडियन भाई, आप आगे बढ़ाएंगे क्या इसको? Interference in matters of religion. There's not the smallest doubt that all men, whether ignorant or well-informed, whether high or low, felt a firm conviction that the English government was bent on interfering with their religion and with their old established customs. They believed that government intended to force the Christian religion and foreign customs upon Hindu and Muslim alike. This was the chief among the secondary causes of the revolution. It was believed by everyone that government was so slowly but surely developing its plans. Every step, it was thought, was being taken with the most extreme caution. Hence, it is that men said that government does not speak of proselytizing Mohammedans summarily and by force, but it will throw off its veil as it feels itself stronger and will act with great decision. Sir, these are prophetic words. देखिए, जैसे वो ताकत में आ जाएंगे, वो अपना ऊपर का जो चादर है उसको गिराकर अपना असली रूप दिखाएंगे. Events, as I shall presently show, increased and strengthened this conviction. Men never thought that a government would openly compel them to change the religion. The idea was that indirect steps would be taken, such as doing away with the study of Arabic and Sanskrit and reducing the people to ignorance and poverty. In this way, it was supposed the people would be deprived of a knowledge of the principles of their own faith, and their attention turned to books containing the principles of the Christian creed. It was supposed that government would then work on the cupidity and the poverty of its subjects, and on condition of their abjuring their faith, offer them employment in its own service. In the year 1837, the year of the great drought, the step which was taken of rearing orphans in the principles of the Christian faith was looked upon throughout the northwestern provinces as an example of the schemes of government. It was supposed that the government had similarly brought all Hindustanis to a pitch of ignorance and poverty. It would convert them to its own creed. The Hindustanis used, as I have said, to feel an increasing dismay in the annexation of each successive country by the Honorable East India Company. But I assert, without fear of contradiction, that this feeling arose solely from the belief in their minds that as the power of the government increased, and there no longer remained foreign enemies to fight against, or internal troubles to quell, it would turn its attention towards and carry out more systematic interference with the creed and religious observances. हाँ इंडियन भाई आप पढ़ेंगे क्या इसको कि मैं पढ़ूँ? In the first days of British rule in Hindustan, there used to be less talk than at present on the
रुको दादा,
subject of religion. जी
रुक
जी
जाओ दादा, मैं पढ़ता
जी
हूँ।
जी जी जी
यहाँ से है ना, in the first days of British rule.
हाँ 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 जी.
In the first days of British rule in Hindustan, there used to be less talk than at present on the subject of religion. Discussion on this point has been increasing day by day and has now reached its climax. I do not say that the government had interfered in these matters, but it has been a general opinion that all that was done was according to the instructions and hints of government and was by no means displeasing to it. It has been commonly believed that government appointed missionaries and maintained them as its own cost, at its own cost. It has been supposed that government and the officers of government throughout the country were in the habit of giving large sums of money to these missionaries with the intention of converting nee, with the intention of covering their expenses, enabling them to distribute books, and in every way aiding them. Many covenanted officers and many military men have been in the habit of talking to their subordinates about religion. Some of them would bid their servants come to their houses and listen to the preaching of missionaries. And thus it happened that in the course of time, no man felt sure that his creed would last even his own lifetime. The missionaries, moreover, introduced a new system of preaching. They took the printing and circulating controversial tracts in the shape of questions and answers. Men of different faith were spoken of in those tracts in a most offensive and irritating way. In Hindustan, these things have always been managed very differently. Every man in this country preaches and explains his views in his own mosque or his own house. If anyone wishes to listen to them, he can go to the mosque or house and hear what he has to say. But the missionaries' plan was exactly the opposite. They used to attend places of public resort markets, for instance, and fairs, where men of different creeds were collected together and used to begin preaching there. It was only from fear of the authorities that no one bade them be off about their business. In some districts, the missionaries were actually attended by policemen from the station. And then the missionaries did not confine themselves to explaining the doctrines of their own books. In violent and unmeasured language, they attacked the followers and the holy places of their creeds, annoying and insulting beyond expression the feelings of those who listen to them. In the way too, the seeds of discontent were sown deep in the hearts of the people. ये जो है उस टाइम के जो है मिशनरीज एक्टिविटीज के ऊपर भी रोशनी डाल रही है कि वो किस किस तरीके से मतलब गवर्नमेंट इंस्टीट्यूशंस का गवर्नमेंट पैट्रोनेज था उनको, और ये जो है दूसरों को जो है मतलब इंसल्ट भी करते थे दूसरे रिलीजन्स का, उनके फेथ्स का. Then missionary schools were started in which the principles of the Christian faith were taught. Men said it was by the order of government. In some districts, covenanted officers of high position and of great influence used to visit the schools and encourage the people to attend them. Examinations were held in books which taught the tenets of the Christian religion. lads who attended the schools used to be asked such questions as the following: Who is your God? Who is your Redeemer? And the questions they were obliged to answer agreeably to the Christian belief, prizes being given accordingly. This again added to the prevailing ill will. But it may be said with some justice, if the people were not satisfied with this course of education, why did they let their children go to the schools? The fact is that we have here no question of like or dislike. On the contrary, we must account for this by the painfully degraded and ignorant state of the people. They believed that if their children were entered at the schools, they might have employment given by the government and be enabled to find some means of subsistence. subsistence. Hence, they put up with the state of affairs in reality disagreeable enough to them. But it must not be thought that they ever liked those schools. When the village schools were established, the, the general belief was that they were instituted solely with the view of teaching the doctrines of Jesus. The Parguna visitors and deputy inspector who used to go from village to village and town to town advising the people to enter their children at the schools got the nickname of native clergyman. When the Perguna visitor or deputy inspector entered any village, the people used to say that the native clergyman had come. Their sole idea was that these were Christian schools established with the view of converting them. Well informed men, although they did not credit this, saw nevertheless that in these schools nothing but Urdu was taught. They were afraid that their boys, while reading only Urdu, would forget the tenets of their own faith and that they would thus drift into Christianity. They believed. Also, the government wished such books as bore upon the doctrines of the former religions of Hindustan to fall into entire disuse. This was to be done with the view of ensuring the spread of Christianity. In many of the eastern districts of Hindustan where these schools were established, boys were entered at them by compulsion and by compulsion only. It was currently reported that all this was in the pursuance of the orders of government. There was at the same time a great deal of talk in Hindustan about female education. Men believed to be the wish of Men believed it to be the wish of government that girls should attend and be taught at these schools and leave off the habit of sitting veiled. Anything more obnoxious than this to the feelings of Hindustanis cannot be conceived. In some districts, the practice was actually introduced. The Perguna visitors and deputy inspectors hoped by enforcing the attendance of girls to gain credit with their superior. In every way, therefore, right or wrong, they tried to carry out their object. Here then was another cause of discontent among the people, through which they became confirmed in error. Emphasis added. Given such a detailed and specific enumeration of religious grievances by Syed Ahmed Khan himself against the colonial establishments, proselytizing, proselyti- proselyti- uh,
Proselytizing.
proselytizing
Proselyti-
conduct, his argument that there was no legal basis in Islam for the call of jihad given by the mutineers was incongruent. In this regard, Aisha Jalal too is unequivocal that Sayyid Ahmad Khan did not reject the concept of jihad. On the contrary, his efforts were directed at protecting its doctrinal legitimacy by distancing the failure of the mutiny of his core core co-religionists from the concept of jihad, since, according to Khan, the mutineers did not live up to the lofty Islamic requirements of jihad. To sound convincing in his criticism of Muslim mutineers, the simultaneous defense of jihad as a religious doctrine, Khan also ran down the Maulvis and Maulanas who called for jihad as pseudo Maulvis, and the Mughal dynast, Bahadur Shah Zafar himself, as an imbecile king for having paid heed to them. Apart from the above tenacious defense, given his own role in holding Bijnor for the British during the mutiny, when he was a subject under the British, Syed Ahmed Khan marshalled his personal conduct as a proof of loyalty of Muslims towards the British. On his efforts to protect the British during the mutiny, his friend GFI Graham wrote as follows: during the anxious weeks that the English ladies, gentlemen, and children remained in Bijnor, Syed Ahmed Khan did all that man could do to render their stay safe, and was ultimately the means of saving the whole party. As Sir John Strachey,
Strachi.
Strachey, late Lieutenant Governor of the Northwest Provinces, said for him in a speech at Aligarh on the 11th December 1880, no man ever gave nobler proofs of conspicuous,
Conspicuous.
conspicuous,
Conspicuous.
conspicuous courage and loyalty to the British government than were given by him in 1857. No language that I could use would be worthy of the devotion he showed. On his part, Syed Ahmed Khan declared that insofar as the mutiny was concerned, the parties really guilty may have been Ramadin and Matadin, which was of course a reference to Hindus. He went so far as to say that Mohammedans would never harm Christians since both had shared religious beliefs and were people of the book. Here, here is relevant extract from his work, The Loyal Mohammedans of India, where Khan repeatedly appealed to Muslims, Christian brotherhood. No reason of dire extremity to which I allude is that which befell the Mohammedans in 1857-58. There was no atrocity committed then of which the blame was not imputed to the Mohammedans. Although the parties really guilty may have been the parties really guilty may have been Ramadin and Matadin. An Oriental poet has well said, there is no misfortune sent from the heaven which is descended to earth, did not seek for its resting place the dwellings of Mohammedans. Long and anxiously have I pondered upon the events which mark the terrible crisis that has passed over this country, and I am free to confess that the facts which have come to my knowledge and which I firmly believe to be true have been a source of genuine comfort to my soul, inducing, as they do, the proud conviction that the rumors defamatory of the Mohammedans that have got aboard from the quarters of the world are utterly without foundation. Some of the acts of the horrible drama have already been exposed, but as day by day all the particulars are gradually brought to light, then when the naked truth stands revealed, when revealed, then will this one glorious facts stand out in prominent relief that if in Hindustan there was one class of people above another who, from the principles of the religion, from habits and associations, and from kindred disposition, kindred disposition, were fast abound with Christians in their dread hour of trial and danger, in the bonds of amity and friendship. Those people were the Mohammedans, and then will be effectually silenced the tongue of slander, now so loud in their condemnation. I'm an attentive reader of the news. I'm an attentive reader of the newspapers, and I have also read the various works that have been written upon the mutiny and rebellion. And in all do I find the most bitter denunciations against the Mohammedans, who are freely represented as being everything that is vile, treacherous, and contemptible. There was no pricky thorn in those awful times respecting which it was not said that it was planted by a Mohammedan. There was no fiery whirlwind. There was no fiery whirlwind that was not raised by a Mohammedan. And yet, what are the facts? The very opposite, indeed, of what the mistaken popular opinion would show them to be. For I really do not see that any class besides the Mohammedans displayed so much single-minded and earnest devotion to the interest of the government, or so willingly sacrificed reputation and status, life and prosperity in its cause. It is an easy thing to make empty profession of loyalty and service, and to write the occasional bulletin of news. And to write an occasional bulletin of news, false or true, but it is to the Mohammedans that the credit belongs of having stood the stanch and unshaken.
वो इसीलिए ऐसा इसी लिखा हुआ है स्टॉन्च, मतलब ये उनका कोट दिया गया इसमें, इसलिए स्टॉन्च होगा, लेकिन वो स्टॉन्च लिखे थे, unshaken friends of the government.
Unshaken friends of the government amidst the fearful tornado that devastated the country and shook the empire to its center, and who were ever ready, heart and hand, to render their aid to the utmost extremity, or cheerfully to perish the attempt, regardless of home and kindred of life and its kindred of life and its enjoyments.
बाकी पढ़ो, मैं जल्दी पढ़ दूं सर, जल्दी पढ़ दूं मैं. Be it known, however, that I certainly am no advocate of those Mohammedans who behaved undutifully and joined in the rebellion. On the contrary, I hold their conduct in utter abhorrence as being in the highest degree criminal and wholly inexcusable. At that momentous crisis, it was imperatively their duty, a duty enjoined by the precepts of our religion, to identify themselves heartily with the Christians and to espouse their cause, seeing that they have, like ourselves, been favored with the revelation from heaven, and believe in the prophets, and hold sacred the word of God in his holy book, which is also an object of faith with us. Verily, such unworthy Mohammedans have well deserved the righteous indignation of all right-thinking men. But at the same time, I must deprecate the whole-scale denunciation against Mohammedans as a race, in which the newspapers are wont to indulge, and which stains the pages of those who have written upon the events. Of 1857. यहाँ देखिए पूरा हिंदुओं के ऊपर ब्लेम डाल रहा है, कितना मीठा मीठा बात बोलकर.
दादा सेम है, जैसे अभी हो रहा है वैसे तब भी होता था.
हम लोग गवर्नमेंट के साथ हैं, हम लोग दुश्मन नहीं है क्रिश्चियनिटी के. Dono religion bhai bhai hai. Their Khan proves himself to be the forerunner of the Pakistani mindset, which creates the bad cop, plays the good cop, and takes the West for a ride to continue the pursuit of its anti-Hindu, anti-Bharat agenda. Had the mutiny succeeded, Syed Ahmed Khan would probably have hailed it as proof of success of jihad and credited the hand of providence. Since it did not succeed, the concept of jihad had to be protected from the blemish of failure, and the Muslim community absolved of participation in the mutiny by pointing fingers exclusively at Ramadan and Matadin, that is Hindus, as well as at the British for triggering the mutiny through their policies. Clearly, as stated earlier, Khan's case of Muslim loyalty towards the British Empire was the convenient product of the Muslim inability to compete with the British on the battlefield, which proved the futility of an armed jihad against them. Critically, it also underscored the fact that Muslims could not afford to stay aloof from the colonial establishment either, since that would allow a Hindu takeover. To address the latter, Khan took it upon himself to act as the interlocutor between Muslims in Bharat and the colonial Christian establishment by encouraging inter-community dining and comparative study of the Quran and the Bible to demonstrate that they, as the people of the book, were not that far apart. His objective, of course, was to convey the message that in view of the shared Abrahamic antecedents of Christianity and Islam and the similarities, Muslims and the British could establish a mutual beneficial alliance. I leave it to the reader to infer who this holy and mutually beneficial alliance was meant to be aimed at. While encouraging greater interaction between Muslims and the British, Khan also employed the Christian polemic framework to respond to Christian criticism of Islam, an effort in which he was not alone. There were others, such as Syed Amir Ali, Shibli, Nomani, and Maulvi Chirag Ali. Chirag Ali, who worked for the Nizam of Hyderabad and after whom a prominent lane in Hyderabad is still named, saw a mentor in Syed Ahmed Khan. The cause for the defense of Islam was served on a platter to the community and to these individuals when William Muir's 4-volume treatise titled Life of Mahomet was published between 1956 and 1961. This treatise critiqued and criticized Islam through the examination of its fundamentals in history. On this, Aisha Jalal writes, there was enough ammunition here for 1,000,000 Muslim mutinies. Muir's work was seen as a threat to the faith of the younger generation of Western educated Muslims. The first to retaliate with a verbal jihad was Syed Ahmed Khan, taking heart in the Prophet's saying that the ink of the scholar is weightier than the blood of the martyr. Locating himself within the Islamic tradition, he borrowed the polemical methods of Christian apologists. Syed Ahmed Khan's retaliation of verbal jihad, as Jalal calls it, took the form of 12 aces in Urdu, titled Qubati Ahmadiyya, which were translated largely by his son, Syed Mahmud, published in English in 1870 as a series of essays on the life of Muhammad and his subjects subsidiary thereto. And Syed Amir Ali wrote a critical examination of the life and teachings of Muhammad. In my view, this incident was a textbook case of two Abrahamic colonialities, namely the European and the Middle Eastern, attempting to demonstrate their respective moral superiorities and their claims to civilization, enlightenment, liberty, truth, and all that is pure and rational under the sun. On the one hand, Christian writers employed the colonial Orientalist framework to a significant extent, while the Muslim counterparts employed the post-colonial framework, but on the other hand, neither was interested in acknowledging the scripture-sanctioned treatment meted out to non-Christian and non-Muslim societies and cultures in the name of their respective true faiths. Syed Ahmed Khan's response to Muir's criticism of Islam and the Islamic prophet required him to rationalize several Quranic miraculous claims and in the process depart to a significant extent from the literal interpretation of the Quran as propounded by Dehlvi. In other words, similar to his Hindu contemporaries, Khan felt the need to prove that his religion was rational, scientific, modern, and therefore relevant. This experience would go on to shape his approach to the West as well as to Islam. The tendency to reform the Muslim community was driven partly by subconscious coloniality to bring his community at par with the West, partly by Dehlevite reformist thoughts. The former would lead to the setting up of institutions that combined Islam and Western thinking, while the latter would drive efforts for restoration of Islam's purity and its sovereignty over Bharat. Aligarh. Syed Ahmed Khan founded the Translation Society in Ghazipur in January 1864, which was shifted to Aligarh in April that year and renamed Scientific Society of Aligarh under the auspices of the Aligarh Institute. According to some scholars, in establishing the society, Khan was inspired by Nawab Abdul Latif's Mohammedan Literary Society during his visit to Calcutta. Khan's project was received warmly by the British, as evidenced from the fact that a land grant was made for the society's establishment. The objectives of the scientific society were twofold: to encourage greater interaction between Englishmen and Muslim intelligentsia, and to translate Western works, especially in the realm of sciences and the arts, into Urdu. Although this initiative was not successful in creating a wide impact, it certainly seemed to have. Left Khan deeply in awe of Europeans and their scientific progress, and also sympathetic to their disdain for Indians. His subsequent trip to England in 1869 for admission of his younger son, Syed Mahmud, to Cambridge deepened his awe of that country and the West in general, and exacerbated his contempt for Indians. This was revealed in his letters published in the Aligarh Institute Gazette, an extract from which is reproduced here. We in Hindustan look upon the English as possessing evil disposition, saying that they look upon Hindustanis as animals or beasts and consider them low to a degree. They do not understand us, and moreover, I say in truth that we are so. I say without exaggeration and in all sincerity that all Hindustanis, from the highest to the lowest, the richest and the poorest, the merchants and the laborers, the best educated and the most ignorant, we are, in comparison with the breeding and affability of the English, as dirty, unclean, wild beasts in the presence of beautiful and worthy men. I know my countrymen will take this as a hard thing from me. देखिए यहाँ क्या बोल रहा है, इंग्लिशों को ग्लोरीफाई कर रहा है और बोल रहा है जितना हिंदुस्तानी है सब मतलब बहुत ही इग्नोरेंट है, dirty, unclean, wild beasts in the presence of beautiful and worthy Englishmen. कैसा नैरेटिव बना रहा है. Counterintuitively, Khan's trip to England may have strengthened his position with broadly mirrored Dehlvi's that the reason for the decline of Muslim society was its deviation from.
दादा एक मिनट देखना, मैं इसको थोड़ा सा साइज ठीक कर रहा हूँ.
जी
अभी ठीक है?
हाँ,
पढ़ने
ठीक
में
है.
आ रहा कि नहीं?
हाँ.
एक मिनट मैं इसमें
Counterintuitively, Khan's trip to England may have strengthened his position, which broadly mirrored Dehlvi's that the reason for the decline of Muslim society was its deviation from the Quran by placing primary reliance on the pronouncements of various schools of Islamic law instead of applying one's own rational faculties to the text to keep pace with the times, and calling for greater reliance on the Quran and selective reliance on the Hadith. Khan's position was closer to the views of the Ahli Hadith and the Ahli Quran movement. However, the difference in the approach between these movements and Khan was that while these movements were more insular and isolationist. Khan was of the view that Islam, if practiced in its pristine form, was not at loggerheads with scientific temperament and progress, but was in fact welcoming of it. According to Syed Ahmed Khan, complete reform of Muslim life in Bharat, starting with religious beliefs and practices, was necessary in order for the Muslims to take their rightful place in Bharat as well as to take on the challenge of the West. Thanks to these views, Khan, according to Metcalfe, was seen by his contemporaries as a westernized Islamic reformer with Wahhabi convictions. That is, the goals were generally Islamic and specifically Wahhabi Dehlvi, while the means of achieving the same were a combination of Islamic and Western. In this sense, Khan was a more refined, anglicized and Western version of the Syed Shahid Barelvi, since he too pursued Dehlvi's vision, but in a manner acceptable to the times he lived in, namely through the pen and institution building, that is, intellectual and institutional jihad, as opposed to Barelvi's overt and armed version. Interestingly, Khan's Wahhabi beliefs, or at least his agreement with Wahhabism, came to the fore in 1872 when he responded to William Hunter's book, The Indian Mussalmans, which examined the Wahhabi movement. Similar to his defense of the Muslim community in the aftermath of the mutiny of 1857, without undermining the concept of jihad, Khan's defense against the supported Wahhabi beliefs but took the position that the entire Muslim community could not be accused of being complicit with the Wahhabi movement and its jihad against the British. Yet it is pertinent to recollect that in his first book in 1847, which was written in Urdu, he had not only hailed the Wahhabis for their jihad, but had also himself acknowledged that every year the Mujahids, holy warriors, go from different native places for the jihad against the Sikhs in the northwestern provinces. Clearly, facts and positions are diluted in the journey from Urdu to English, a phenomenon that Dr. Arun Shourie described in his work on the destruction of Hindu temples by Islamic invaders, when he noticed the progressive dilution of facts as they traversed a path from Arabic to English through Urdu. Coming back to Syed Ahmed Khan, his westernized Wahhabi reformist impulses led to the establishment of two traditional madrasas, one in Muradabad and the other in Ghazipur, where he intended to implement his reformist vision as well as offset the criticism that he diluted traditional Quranic learning. In 1870, he founded a journal, Tahzib ul Akhlaq, or the Mohammedan social reformer, to demonstrate through his writings that Islam, reform and progress were not mutually exclusive. Khan was supported in his views by his man Friday, Maulvi Samiullah Khan, the Nawabs Mushin ul Mulk and Bakar ul Mulk, the future founders of the All India Muslim League, the scholar Dr. Nazir Ahmed, and the poet Altaf Hussain Hali. Gradually, the founding of these institutions and subsequent ones came to be known as the Aligarh movement, since Aligarh was chosen as its base. According to M.S. Jain, it was during his trip to England that Syed Ahmed Khan chose Aligarh as the epicenter of his movement, owing to Muslim majority composition of the neighboring districts and the strong presence there of a Muslim feudal aristocracy. That apart, since the name Aligarh contained Ali, which held a special significance for the Islamic prophet, the choice seemed apt to Syed Ahmed Khan. Naturally, the movement attracted the former ruling Muslim elite in and around Aligarh and the young scions of Muslim aristocracy from across the Bharatiya subcontinent. However, it was vehemently opposed for his westernized approach to Islam, as well as for Khan's British loyalist interpretation of jihad by several of his contemporaries like Haji Ali Bakhsh Badauni and Haji Imdadul Ali. The former went so far as to obtain a fatwa of kufr, means against the tenets of Islam, from Hijaz against Khan in 1873. As a consequence of such opposition, when Khan floated the proposal for a Mohammedan college, which would have, among other things, English as its medium of instruction alongside traditional Islamic learning under ulema, whose curriculum he could not interfere with, the budgetary target of rupees 10 lakhs that Khan had set. For himself could not be met. However, with the encouragement of Samiullah Khan and the support of powerful Muslim aristocrats such as Salah Jung, who at that time was the Prime Minister of the Nizam of Hyderabad, Syed Ahmed Khan founded the Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College as a primary school on 24th of May 1875. Interestingly, William Muir, with whom Khan had sparred on the subject of Islam, visited the college in October 1875 and addressed its students. Similarly, W. W. Hunter visited the institution in 1882 as part of the Commission on Indian Education and held its first session in the college. Both these visits represented significant milestones in the changed attitudes of the British and Muslims towards each other, for which Syed Ahmed Khan's efforts, along with those of others such as Nawab Abdul Latif and Syed Amir Ali, must be credited. In keeping with his position that Muslims must overcome the sectarian divides in order to forge a national identity and reclaim their rightful place, Sunnis and Shias were allowed to formulate their own religious curricula in the college. Accordingly, Maulvi Chirag Ali from Hyderabad and Maulvi Samiullah Khan were appointed secretaries for the respective Shia and Sunni education committees. In 1876, Syed Ahmed Khan retired from government service to devote all his time and energy to the college, whose foundation stone was laid by the Viceroy of the time, Lord Lytton, on 8th of January 1877. The reason that the British establishment viewed Khan's initiatives and the Aligarh College with favor was that it was keen on countering the growth of political awareness of the Hindus, who, as stated earlier, had been exposed to English education for at least 5 decades since its introduction in 1817, that is, even before Macaulay's education policy of 1835. According to R.C. Majumdar, the British, like all imperial powers, instinctively followed the policy of divide and rule in governing India. They could not be possibly unaware of the fact that while the Muslims resented the establishment of British political authority, the Hindus welcomed it, and so at the beginning they unduly favored the Hindus. But after 2 generations of the Hindus had imbibed Western ideas through English education, they showed signs of political development which was regarded by the government as anti-British and almost revolutionary. So they eagerly seized the opportunity offered by Syed Ahmed of enlisting the support of the great but politically undeveloped Muslim community and holding it as a counterpoise to the progressive Hindu community. Henceforth, the British government steadily followed the policy one wheel of the car of India's political evolution so that its progress may be slowed down, even if not altogether stopped. British support to the Aligarh establishment is evident from the fact that several Englishmen contributed to the construction of the college, which was equally reciprocated by the college, which hired a good number of Englishmen among its faculty, including as principals. In particular, according to Majumdar, Theodore Beck, the first principal of Aligarh College, contributed heavily to the stoking of both Muslim nationalism and anti-Hindu bias in the minds of his students. Beck gave up a career in England and dedicated his life to the faithful service of Muslims in Bharat, who regarded him as their faithful friend. Apart from vilifying Bengali Hindus, he stoked the fear that a Hindu majority parliamentary democracy would be a disaster for Muslims, since Hindus would be the absolute masters of the Mohammedan ever was. In the 1889 session of the Indian National Congress at Bombay, when Charles Bradlaugh, a member of the British House of Commons, promised to introduce the Indian Council's Amendment Bill, also known as the Home Rule Bill, in the House of Commons, Beck prepared a petition to oppose the bill on behalf of Muslims. He proceeded to Delhi with a few of his students and obtained the signatures of 20,000 Muslims to oppose the Home Rule Bill by misleading the signatories to believe that it was a petition against a ban on cow slaughter proposed by the Hindus. In 1893, under Beck's encouragement, a few Muslim intellectuals established the Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental Defense Association of Upper India for the purpose of advocating the Muslim cause before the British establishment. Beck, as the secretary of the association, held the following views on the Congress' demand for introduction of democracy in India. The objective of the Congress is to transfer the political control of the country from the British to the Hindus. It demands the repeal of the Arms Act, reduction of military expenditure, and the consequential weakening of the frontier defenses. Muslims can have no sympathy with these demands. It is imperative for the Muslims and the British to unite with a view to fighting these agitators and prevent the introduction of democratic form of government unsuited as it is so the to the needs and genius of the country. We therefore advocate loyalty to the government and Anglo-Muslim collaboration. His talking of anti-Hindu sentiments is evident from the speech delivered by him in 1895 in London, which was summarized by the Aligarh College magazine as follows. 1. A friendship between the British people and the Muslims was possible, but not between Muslims and followers of other religions. For example, the followers of Shivaji and those of Guru Gobind Singh would never agree with the Muslims in accepting Aurangzeb as the hero. 2. Muslims would never accept a system of government in which the Hindu majority would rule over them. The Muslims of Kashmir, who were living under the yoke of Brahmin officers, envied the good fortune of the Muslims who were living happily under the British rule. 3. Indians themselves did not like a democratic system. They preferred monarchy. Muslim behave the community against agitational politics of Hindus, and they were now wisely acting on the advice of Sir Syed. It was the advice of loyalty to the British. 5. Muslims were opposed to the holding of the competitive examinations in India, for they knew that this step would mean the replacement of many impartial British officers by anti-Muslim Hindus. After Beck's death in 1899, his anti-Hindu legacy was taken forward by successor Theodore Morrison, who remained the principal until 1905. There's no doubt that a divide and rule policy was at work behind British support to the Aligarh College. However, to hold Beck responsible for Syed Ahmed Khan's views would be to ignore Khan's own moorings and leanings, which were consistently reflected both in his writings and speeches much before Beck. It would be naive and factually incorrect to overlook the Dehlawite motivations of Khan. In other words, the Aligarh movement and its institutions represented the mutually beneficial alliance proposed by Khan, much to the detriment of the Indic civilizational consciousness and space. Critically, Khan was clear that the purpose of the college was not to merely churn out loyal and competent employees for the British establishment, but also to provide a space for Muslim solidarity and regeneration, with its graduates serving as modern ambassadors of the cause. In 1878, Khan told his students, "There is no God but Allah. This is the cornerstone of our faith, and only by believing in it we are a nation. If you excel in other fields but do not believe in it, then we shall cease to be a nation. We would have nothing to do with you, even if you shine like stars in the firmament." While pledging loyalty to the British, his vision was restoration of the former position of the Mohammedan nation, calm, through a peaceful revolution, that is, by becoming part of and thereafter taking over the colonial power structure. To this end, Mohammedan was consciously included in the name of the college to primarily attract Muslims, and funds were refused from Hindus who wanted the college established in Allahabad instead of Aligarh. While the Aligarh College did succeed significantly in creating the national Muslim identity, that is, a Muslim identity which overcame sectarian, regional, and linguistic divides, its very strengths became its weaknesses. The institutions marked Western slant. Its insistence on a sense of loyalty to the British Crown and the presence of English staff, including principals, contributed to the belief that the atmosphere of the college encouraged students only from the Muslim aristocracy and not the lower strata of the Muslim society. To make matters worse, in a speech delivered in Lucknow in 1887, Syed Ahmed Khan dismissed the idea of the lower classes climbing up the ladder to rule over the nobility. So much so for Islamic egalitarianism and brotherhood. These aspects of the institution led to some of its leading lights moving away from it to other institutions committed to traditional Islamic learning. For instance, as stated earlier, in 1894, Shibli Nomani moved to Nahdlatul Ulama since he did not believe in accepting the colonial state and engaging with it. He sought an Islamic state which was governed by Sharia, and Aligarh, according to him, was not moving in that direction. Despite these criticisms and setbacks, under the stewardship of Syed Ahmed Khan, the Aligarh movement and its institutions did play a hugely impactful role in fostering of Muslim nationalism, which was its founding objective. The two-nation theory.
दादा बस 1.5 घंटा हो गया है, ठीक है।
जी जी,
वो टू नेशन थ्योरी को हम कल करते हैं, ठीक है।
जी 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 जी। देखिए
क्योंकि
नैरेटिव देखिए,
ये जो है दादा लगभग 156 पेज तक जाएगा टू नेशन थ्योरी। एक मिनट मैं देख के बताता हूँ
जी।
ये जो अगला आ रहा है
जी
156 तक जा रहा है, तो ये 155 तक जाएगा, तो यानी एटलीस्ट 22 से 35 ना,
जी
22 और 33 पेज है वो, तो आज नहीं हो पाएगा ये। ये कल का पूरा दिन ही लग जाएगा इसी पे ही। फिर उसके बाद ये जो अगला आ रहा है, अगला कहाँ तक जाएगा ये देखते हैं। वन 174 तक जा रहा है,
जी
ठीक है।
जी
35 वो, ये दोनों एक दिन लगेंगे। तो ऐसे ही इसको जो है कल करेंगे। हाँ,
जी।
रावण दादा से पूछते हैं। जी दादा। तेजवीर भाई आ गए।
नमस्कार जी।
प्रोफेसर साहब आ जाओ। मैं लिंक दोबारा दे रहा हूँ। प्रोफेसर साहब आ जाओ। ठीक है, तो रावण दादा आपसे शुरू करते हैं।
कमेंट।
हाँ दादा,
जी जी
आज इस पे कमेंट जो आप अभी तक जो पढ़ा है हमने, अलीगढ़ मुस्लिम यूनिवर्सिटी का फॉर्मेशन, सर सैयद अहमद खान बरेलवी, और ब्रिटिश का इनके साथ जो वो रोमांस चल रहा था वो पूरा, इन सारी चीजों को आप कैसे?
इसमें एक्चुअली मेरा एक स्टडी है इसके ऊपर, क्योंकि मैं बहुत साल मिडिल ईस्ट में भी रहा ना, बाद में इधर आके भी ये सब देख रहे हैं। तो मुझे तो समझ में आ रहा है कि ये लोगों ने, यानी दुनिया भर का जो जिहादियों ने, स्पेशली हमारा साउथ एशियन जो मुसलमान है, ये लोगों ने बहुत चतुर वे में, यानी बहुत स्मार्ट वे में सबको उल्लू बना दिया,
जी
ब्रिटिशों
जी
को भी।
बिल्कुल
जी दादा।
और वो उल्लू वो लोग ने अभी भी बनाते जा रहे हैं। और मूर्ख हम नॉन मुस्लिम्स अभी भी वो उनका जो विक्टिम कार्ड बोल दे या फिर उनका जो स्ट्रेटजी है उसमें फंसते जा रहे हैं। सिर्फ भारत के अंदर नहीं, सारा नॉन मुस्लिम कंट्रीज के अंदर। स्पेशली जिधर डेमोक्रेटिक सेकुलर सिस्टम चल रहा है, यूरोप में होने दे, ऑस्ट्रेलिया, अमेरिका, जापान, कोरिया,
जी
इवन
जी
चाइना में भी। आपको मालूम है चाइना का भी हम लोग सब लोग बोलते हैं ना कि चाइना भी इनको बराबर पेल के रखा हुआ है करके। एक्चुअली वो यही चाइना के अंदर दूसरा भी एक काम हो रहा है जो हम लोगों को बहुत कम मालूम है। मैं इससे
जी
पहले भी मैं किधर भी ये जिक्र किया हुआ है। जब से चाइना तिब्बत को कब्जा किया ना, तो
जी
तिब्बत में ये लोग ने क्या किया मालूम है, अभी भी वो काम चालू है। तिब्बत के अंदर चाइनीस मुसलमान है, चाइनीस मुसलमान,
जी जी
वो लोगों को वो लोग ने रीलोकेटेड कर दिया बारी बारी तिब्बत के अंदर, ताकि तिब्बत का तिब्बतियन लोगों का डेमोग्राफी को चेंज कर रहे। बहुत अच्छा स्ट्रेटजी है वो। तो
जी जी
इवन
जी
चाइना भी मूर्ख बन रहा है। चाइना को मालूम नहीं है ये कि क्या कर रहा है करके। चाहे वो टिबेटन्स जो था वो ओरिजिनल, वो लोग बुद्धिस्ट है, वो उधर रहने से उनको क्या प्रॉब्लम है। चाइना को आगे जाके कुछ होने वाला नहीं था अगर वो तिब्बतन बुद्धिस्ट को तिब्बत में अगर वो लोगों ने रहने दिया होता। लेकिन चाइना भी गलती कर दिया उधर। अभी सुनने में आया आधे से ज्यादा तिब्बत के अंदर चाइनीज मुसलमानों का गलबा हो गया। अभी तिब्बतन बुद्धिस्ट है वो सब भाग गया, चाइना से बाहर निकल गया, समझा। तो
राउंड सर, और एक चीज बताऊं मैं, इन लोग धीरे
जी
धीरे ना नेपाल में और नेपाल से दार्जिलिंग डिस्ट्रिक्ट में घुस रहे हैं। मैं दार्जिलिंग गया था तो वहाँ मेरे को मिला, मेरे को दूसरे लोगों ने बताया कि ये लोग जो है चाइनीज मुस्लिम है, ये लोग रेस्टोरेंट खोल के बैठा है।
ये भारत में।
हाँ हाँ हाँ, दार्जिलिंग है ना हमारे यहाँ बंगाल में।
हाँ हाँ, चाइनीज मुस्लिम लोग भारत में दार्जिलिंग में आ गया।
हाँ हाँ हाँ, और नेपाल में तो है ही।
अच्छा, हाँ, ये मेरे लिए नया इन्फॉर्मेशन है। तो कहने का मतलब ये हुआ मेरा, सारा दुनिया में ये जो ये जो जिहाद है या जिहादी है, ये खत्म नहीं हो रहा है इनका। यही ग्रोथ ही हो रहा है, फ्लोरिशिंग हो रहा है। कोई भी जगह में इनका दमन नहीं है। मेरा एक अपना स्टडी में किधर भी इनका दमन नहीं है, सब जगह में फ्लरिश ही हो रहे हैं वो लोग।
हम लोग
ना
बेवकूफ
चाइना में
लोग हैं।
या ना भारत
अच्छा
में
दादा,
या इंडिया में,
आप
किधर भी।
जो चीज बता रहे हैं इसके पीछे आप रीजन क्या समझते हैं?
रीजन
आउटस्मार्ट
यही तो,
क्यों पाते हैं?
रीजन मैं बताया ना, वो लोगों का वो स्ट्रैटेजी है ना, मुसलमानों का जो स्ट्रैटेजी है विक्टिम कार्ड खेलना, और हम लोगों का साथ यानी नॉन मुसलमानों का साथ उनका अलता किया,
मैं
समझा।
एक बात बोलूं जी।
जी
मैं बोल रहा हूँ कि जैसे कोरोना फैलाया गया ना, चाइनीज भी कचड़ा जो है दूसरे जगह घुसा रहे हैं कि जाके इन लोग परेशान करें और लोगों को फैलते जाएं। ये भी तो हो सकता है।
दादा,
जी
मैं
जी
मेरा
एक सेकंड,
ऑब्जर्वेशन ये कहता है।
एक सेकंड, मैं मेरा वो पॉइंट को जरा पूरा करने दे।
जी
जैसा
जी
कि मैं बोला ना, इनका विक्टिम कार्ड खेलना और अलतकिया, अलतकिया इनका बहुत अच्छा काम करता है, बहुत अच्छा,
इसी में तो दिखाई दे। जी जी
बहुत जबरदस्त काम करता है। मुझे अभी भी याद है 90 लेट 90 इरा में मेरा कोलिग्स लोग था, जर्मन लोग। तो मुझे उससे पहले ही मालूम पड़ा था जर्मनी के अंदर उस टाइम में, 90s का बात कर रहा हूँ मैं,
जी जी जी
3.5 मिलियन, 3.5 मिलियन तुर्किश मुस्लिम्स जर्मनी में करके, ठीक है। तो जब ये लोग का साथ मैं काम करता था, तो मुझे तो पैशन ये मामले में उस वक्त भी था। मैं वो लोगों को पूछता था, मैं कि सुनने में आया तुम्हारे उधर 3.5 मिलियन ये तुर्किश लोग रहते हैं। तो वो लोग क्या बोल रहा था मालूम है मुझे, मुझे अभी भी याद है, उसमें एक दो जर्मन लेडीज भी थे, वो लोग भी बहुत तारीफ कर रहा था, बोलता है ओह दे आर वेरी नाइस पीपल, वेरी नाइस पीपल। तो मुझे अभी ये सब फ्लैशबैक में जाएगा तो
याद
एक
है।
एक
जी
चीज याद आ रहा है। देखो वो लोगों का हाल तक किया, देखो क्यों वो टाइम में, अभी भी वो लोग माइनॉरिटी में है ना, जिधर जिधर वो लोग माइनॉरिटी में रहते हैं उधर इतना
They're
नाइस
very
बन
nice
जाता है,
people.
बहुत नाइस बन जाता है, बहुत नाइस, समझा है? और वो एक नाइस है लोगों का, यही उनका सक्सेस है। इवन हमारा भारत के अंदर भी ये वामपंथी दल या जो सो कॉल्ड सेकुलर हमारा हिंदू, इनको सपोर्ट क्यों करता है? क्योंकि उनको इक्का दुक्का मुसलमान कोई दोस्त लोग होगा, समझा, और वो लोग उनका साथ बहुत अच्छा होता है। इवन मेरा अपना भी कुछ अच्छा अच्छा दोस्त लोग है, लेकिन मैं जानता है ना, वो कितना भी अच्छा होने दे, अगर यदि वो इस्लाम को फॉलो करता है तो उसको, उसका दिल के अंदर या वो दिमाग में किधर भी वो बात तो होगा, यदि या वो
नफरत
वो
रहेगी।
ऐसे।
दादा
हाँ,
वो जो है दिख जाता है, अगर
एक सेकंड,
समझदार आदमी
एक
होगा।
सेकंड, यदि उसका अंदर ऐसा कुछ नहीं है तो फिर वो एक्स मुस्लिम है। यदि वो आदमी मुस्लिम है तो उसको किताब फॉलो करना बहुत जरूरी है। तो वो
जी
भी अल तक यही कर रहा है, नाइस, वेरी नाइस, वेरी नाइस। जी।
जी दादा, अब आगे बढ़ते हैं क्योंकि अभी और भी लोग आए हैं। आपके इस पे मैं ये बोलना चाहूँगा कि मैं अपना ऑब्जर्वेशन देता हूँ। अगर ये अलतकैया करते हैं तो उसके साथ कुछ लोगों के और के भी इंटरेस्ट जुड़ जाते हैं। अब इंडिया वाले केस में लेता हूँ, जब ब्रिटिश आए थे तो ब्रिटिश को इन्होंने अलतकैया का कौन सा रूप दिखाया कि वी बोथ आर द पीपल ऑफ द बुक, ठीक है, एंड दे फेल फॉर इट। आज
और
के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में क्या चल रहा है? लेफ्ट is strengthening them, thinking that they'll use them,
एक
but what
सेकंड,
will
एक
happen,
सेकंड है,
they'll ask
एक सेकंड है, एक सेकंड, माफी चाहता हूँ। देखो ब्रिटिश को ना, ब्रिटिश को वो लोग ने सिर्फ वो बात में सिर्फ उनका साथ दोस्ती नहीं, ऊपर से बहुत सा
कॉमन
हमारा जो
एनिमी।
फ्रीडम, नहीं नहीं नहीं, जो फ्रीडम फाइटर्स था ना, वो ज्यादातर
हम्म
हिंदू ही, समझा,
हम्म।
ज्यादातर ज्यादातर हिंदू लोग ही थे, तो इनका ये
जी
लोग
जी
मुखबरी बहुत करता था ब्रिटिशों के साथ,
अरे वो तो ठीक है
समझा।
दादा, इसीलिए मैं कह रहा हूँ
हाँ,
ना,
तो
एक
नहीं नहीं
कॉमन
नहीं,
एनिमी भी
लेट
था
मी लेट मी
इनका।
कंप्लीट, लेट मी कंप्लीट। उसमें क्या हो गया, तो ब्रिटिश को तो दो तरफ से इनका ये क्या बोलता है, रिलेशन मिल रहा है। एक तो जैसे कि आपने बोला बोला पीपल ऑफ बुक करके, और ऊपर से उनको फायदा भी मिल रहा है ना ये लोगों की वजह से, मुखबरी
जी
करके,
दादा, तीसरा मेन
समझा था?
रीजन ये है कि इन दोनों का कॉमन एनिमी हिंदू था यहाँ।
जी जी, वही मैं बोल रहा ना।
तो अब और चलते हैं दादा, दूसरा आज के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में लेफ्ट इनको पूरा सपोर्ट कर रहा है ये सोच के कि हम इनको यूज करेंगे, बट होगा क्या कि ये आउटस्मार्ट कर जाएंगे इनको भी, द वे दे आर डूइंग इन चाइना, ठीक है, जबकि चाइना को वन ऑफ द स्ट्रॉन्गेस्ट मानते हैं टू काउंटर इस्लाम, बट वहां भी ये किसी तरीके से मैन्यूवरिंग कर रहे हैं और आउटस्मार्ट कर रहे हैं। अच्छा आगे चलते हैं, ये वाला तो हो गया। अब हम पूछेंगे तेजवीर भाई से। तेजवीर भाई, आज के ऊपर आपका जो अभी तक स्टोरी चली है, तो उस पे आपका क्या कहना है, कमेंट्स? तेजवीर भाई हो?
बिरजू भाई हैं, बिरजू भाई से
ठीक है,
पूछते हैं।
बिरजू भाई।
अरे मैं अवघड़ हूँ भाई। सभी को नमस्कार दादा।
हाँ, नमस्कार नमस्कार, बोलिए।
चलो, अरे बेटा बिरजू, अरे बोल भाई।
मैं गया था नौ बौद्धों के चैनल में हूँ डंडा करने।
ठीक है, बहुत बढ़िया।
तो एक चीज भूल गए रावण दादा कहने के लिए, ब्रिटिशर्स क्या करते थे, जहाँ मुस्लिम पॉपुलेशन ज्यादा थी 50% के ऊपर, तो वहाँ हिंदुओं को जागीरदार, हिंदुओं को अफसर बनाते थे। ठीक, सारा उनका जो कार्यशैली थी वो हिंदुओं के ऊपर छोड़ते थे। और जहाँ पे मुस्लिम माइनॉरिटी में होते थे, हिंदू मेजोरिटी में होते थे, तो जितनी जमींदारी जागीरदारी ज़्यादातर जो होती थी वो देते थे किनको, हिंदुओं को। इसका बेस्ट एग्जांपल आप इधर से क्या कहते हैं, पाकिस्तान में आप देख सकते थे, पंजाब और वो क्या कहते हैं वो पेशावर वाले एरिया पे, और बंगाल में तो, और कश्मीर में भी आप देख सकते थे। तो वो ये चीज तो खेलते थे भाई, उनको तो, उनसे क्या मतलब, उनको तो बस ये था कि चाहे वो मुस्लिम हो चाहे हिंदू हो, टारगेट तो मेन इंडियन लैंड हिंदू का ही था। तो मेन चीज तो उसमें जो हमारी इंडियन सिविलाइजेशन थी वही टारगेट में थी कि इसको पहले डिस्ट्रॉय करो, ये मेजोरिटी में है। और लेफ्ट का सीन ये है कि लेफ्ट सोचता है कि इनकी वजह से हम पावर में आ जाएंगे, पर ये भूल कर रहे हैं जिस दिन ये राइट विंग की
ये
सोच
पावर में
खत्म
आ
हुई
गए तो
तो
ये इनको नहीं छोड़ेंगे।
हाँ, जिस दिन राइट विंग की सोच खत्म हुई राइट विंग वाले, तो उस दिन लेफ्ट को अपने आप खत्म कर देंगे ये लोग। बताओ कोई ऐसा मुस्लिम कंट्री है जहां पे लेफ्ट लिबरल जी रहे हों? बांग्लादेश में हर महीने कोई ना कोई ब्लॉगर मार दिया जाता है जो
अच्छा,
सेकुलर
एक
बनता
स्टेप
है।
आगे भी बढ़ जाओ अगर भाई, अगर
हाँ
जो है राइट विंग खत्म हो गया, इधर लेफ्ट विंग बढ़ गया, तो ये ऑब्वियसली लेफ्ट विंग को खत्म कर देंगे। नंबर्स तो इनके ज्यादा है, फिर थोड़ी ये कानून मानते हैं या विज्ञान ज्ञान मानते हैं, ये तो फिर पेल डालते हैं। और
ये
उनको
आसमानी
खत्म
की,
करने के बाद में ये खुद भी तो खत्म हो जाएंगे, शिया सुन्नी और फलाना डिमाका और
हाँ
ये
तो
वो।
वो तो है ही भाई। ईरान इराक में क्या किया वो ISIS, वो उनको लॉन्डी बना रहा है, फिर उनको कैद में रख रहा है, और पूरा बिल्कुल वही 1400 साल पहले वाला जाहिलियत। और यही तो नाइजीरिया में भी कर रहे हैं, हर जगह यही हो रहा है। वो जो
अगर भाई
भाई एक,
थोड़ा सा करेक्ट कर लो, वो जाहिलियत नहीं है, वो इनका नूर है।
हाँ वो नूर है, वो सुन्नत है
हाँ,
असल में। दूसरी चीज, अगर इसको टैकल करना है इंडिया के पर्सपेक्टिव में, तो सबसे पहले एक ऐसा बिल लाए कि क्लास 10th तक हर बच्चे को मॉडर्न एजुकेशन लेनी है, कोई भी धार्मिक एजुकेशन नहीं लेनी। ये सबसे पहले लागू कर दे। अगर मदरसे भी चल रहे हों तो उनमें क्लास 10th वाले, जो भी अगर जहाँ पे भी जो भी अगर पढ़ाई का इंस्टीट्यूशन है छोटे बच्चों का, अगर वो ये मॉडर्न एजुकेशन नहीं दे रहा तो उसके खिलाफ कड़े कानून, 5 साल जेल, संपत्ति पूरी जब्त कर लें, रोड पे ला दे। इस तरह कठोर कानून बनेंगे तो जो हर साल मदरसों से 20-25 लाख जिहादी निकल रहे हैं, इनको टैकल करने के लिए कोई है हिंदुओं में ऐसी कोई सोच? हिंदुओं में गुरुकुल हैं इस तरह करके कुछ है? और दूसरी
अगर
चीज,
भाई
हाँ
तो आप अगर कह रहे हो कि एजुकेशन दे देंगे, तो फिर आप जो है क्वालिफाइड जो है जिहादी झेलोगे, अभी तो अनपढ़ जिहादी झेल रहे हो।
नहीं नहीं, अगर क्लास 10 तक के बच्चों को अगर रैशनल एजुकेशन, जो मॉडर्न एजुकेशन देंगे, तो इनका जो ये बेसिक लेवल से कुरान चटाना, हदीसें चटाना, मदरसों में ब्रेन वॉशिंग होना, तो ये बिल्कुल बहुत कम हो जाएगा। ये 10 से 15 या 20% बचेगा। फिर जब वो एक रैशनल एजुकेशन पा जाएगा तो ज्यादातर सोचेंगे कि यार मॉडर्न एजुकेशन चलें कि ये जिहादी वाली पढ़ें, तो उसमें भी डिवाइडेशन हो जाएगा। इंडिया के पर्सपेक्टिव में, इंडिया में भाई चाइना की तरह तो हम डील नहीं कर सकते ना, सबसे बड़ी चीज है। और दूसरी चीजें, हमें तुरंत अपने टेम्पलों को बिल्कुल खाली, वो गवर्नमेंट अंडरटेकिंग छुड़वा के, और लगभग 10 से 20 हजार गुरुकुल खोलें, सनातन संस्कृत की यूनिवर्सिटीज खोलें 5-6 ठो, और उनमें ये लेफ्ट लिबरल, कम्युनिस्ट, ये नौ बौद्ध, ये जितने एंटी एलिमेंट है, ये एंटी ये मदरसा वाली इस्लामिक आइडियोलॉजी, ये कूट कूट के बच्चों को पढ़ाएं। और हिंदू धर्म में भी जो कमियां हैं, ये जातिवाद वगैरह, इसको कैसे खत्म किया जा सकता है, ये भी सब पढ़ाएं। तो हम लोग भी काउंटर में निकालें ना, कम से कम हर साल वो 25 लाख निकाल रहे, तो हम साल 2-2.5, कम से कम हर साल 2-2.5 लोग तो निकालें हम लोग भी। यहाँ तो हम लोगों को मालूम ही नहीं है कुछ।
ठीक है, अब हम
और
अंगद भाई की तरफ चलते हैं। फिर सेकंड राउंड में लेता हूँ,
एक और
अंगद भाई सेकंड राउंड में लूंगा,
जी
है ना। फिर ओपन कर दूंगा, तेजवीर भाई तो ज्यादा बोलते नहीं है, फिर आप और रावण भाई ही रह जाएंगे, ठीक है, टक्कर में।
जी
अंगद
जी
भाई,
जी
आप अपने कमेंट्स दो, फिर बीबी राजा से कमेंट लेंगे लास्ट में। अंगद भाई, बिजी तो नहीं हो?
जय श्री राम।
जय श्री राम।
अभी
आज वाले
जो हमने
टॉपिक
जो देखा है, बात करी है, हमने जो चर्चा किया 2 नेशन थ्योरी का, इतने बड़े बड़े छलावे हो चुके हैं, और आफ्टर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन अभी भी हम देख रहे हैं कि जनता अब जवाब दे चुकी है, और जनता अब त्रस्त हो चुकी है, और जनता के सेवक भी अति त्रस्त हो चुके हैं। अच्छे व्यक्ति भी अब ऐसा बोलने लगे हैं कि अब आपने कुछ पर्टिकुलर शब्द किए तो हम थक गए हैं, अब तो विवाद होगा। तो यही मेरे कमेंट है कि अब जनता से मेरी प्रार्थना है कि अब आप जागिए, हम आपको इतना पढ़ा रहे हैं, सिखा रहे हैं, समझा रहे हैं, दिखा रहे हैं, सत्य से जागरूकता करवा रहे हैं। झूठ से बाहर निकलिए, अपनी संस्कृति विरासत को समझिए, अपने पुरखों के साथ में, अपने परिवार के साथ में क्या आपके साथ अन्याय हुआ है, ये अन्याय किसी और के साथ नहीं, आपके मेरे स्वयं के साथ हुआ है। इट इज पर्सनल। ऐसा मत सोचना कि किसी और के साथ हुआ है। जब तक आप इसको पर्सनल लेवल पे नहीं लोगे, आप आगे नहीं बढ़ोगे, ये होता ही रहेगा। आप प्रॉब्लम ये होती है, ऐसी होती है कि जैसे इफ समथिंग हैपनिंग इन बांग्लादेश, ठीक है, समथिंग हैपनिंग बांग्लादेश, तो आप समझते हो कि बांग्लादेश में हो रहा है। प्रैक्टिकलिटी आप देखेंगे, कहीं मंदिर तोड़ा जाता है, तो मंदिर तोड़ना मतलब दे आर अटैकिंग ऑन योर पर्सनल, क्योंकि मैं भी तो मंदिर जाता हूँ। भोलेनाथ का मंदिर जो मेरे घर के पास में है, वही मंदिर बांग्लादेश में भी है, वही हिंगलाज माता पाकिस्तान में भी है। अगर मंदिर कोई तोड़ा जाता है तो इट मीन्स वहां पर भी आपके ऊपर पर्सनल अटैक हो रहा है। तो ये आप इग्नोर करना छोड़ दीजिए कि ये हमेशा पर्सनल डिग्निटी पे ही अटैक कर रहा है। तो यू हैव टू राइज। मंदिर में भगवान को हमारे कोई किंचित मार्ग फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा कि हाँ कितने ही मंदिर टूट जाए, किंतु मेरी प्रभु सत्ता है, मेरी राज सत्ता है, ये पर्सनल अटैक है। तो मुझे भारत की जनता को अब जागना चाहिए, हमारे मंदिर हमें रिक्लेम करना है, हमारी संस्कृति बचाना है, और हमारे साथ जो अन्याय हुआ है उसके लिए दोषियों को, दुष्टों को चुन चुन कर, छांट छांट कर उनको सजा देनी है, उन्हें दंड देना है। और जो जबरदस्ती के जो इनके जितने हमारे आक्रमणकारी थे, उनको जो ग्लोबलाइज करके उनके नाम पे यूनिवर्सिटी खोली गई है, पाठ्यक्रम खोले, इन सबको हटाना है। जय श्री राम। धन्यवाद।
अंगद भाई, 2 क्वेश्चन मेरे हैं, ठीक है, आपसे और उसके बाद जो है रावण दादा और वीवी दादा से भी होंगे। दादा, ये जो टू नेशन थ्योरी, अच्छा पहले तो आपका वो वाला जो आप कह रहे हो कि इंडिविजुअल अपने ऊपर लेके समझो, जैसे श्रीलंका में होता तो ये सोचो हमारे ऊपर। इसका एग्जांपल मैं देता हूँ कि क्रिश्चियन पे एक अटैक हुआ था, शायद फ्रांस में हुआ था, यूरोप में कहीं हुआ था, उसका रिटेलिएशन श्रीलंका में हुआ था, ठीक है। श्रीलंका कहाँ है, यूरोप कहाँ है?
न्यूजीलैंड में चर्च में, न्यूजीलैंड में किया था, न्यूजीलैंड में।
हाँ, न्यूजीलैंड में है ना दादा। न्यूजीलैंड कहाँ है, एक अलग कंट्री है, श्रीलंका एक अलग कंट्री है। न्यूजीलैंड में चर्च पे अटैक हुआ तो यहाँ पे श्रीलंका में चर्चों पे हमले हो गए मुस्लिम्स द्वारा। वो कहीं भी होता, उसका बदला जहाँ है वहां ले लेंगे वो, ठीक है। उनमें ये लॉजिक नहीं चलता कि वहां हुआ तो हम वही करेंगे या वही लोग करेंगे, नहीं, हम कर लेंगे
न्यूजीलैंड में चर्च में नहीं, नमाजियों के ऊपर।
हाँ, जो कुछ भी है, मतलब ऐसी ही कहानी है ना, कुल रिटेलिएशन है ना। श्रीलंका का इंडिजीनियस तो वो झगड़ा नहीं था ना। अच्छा, दूसरा क्वेश्चन ये था, जो टू नेशन थ्योरी है, हम इंग्लिश में नाम पढ़ते हैं, अच्छा लगता है टू नेशन थ्योरी, ये भी क्या हमें बेवकूफ बनाने के लिए है कि दारुल इस्लाम और दारुल हर्ब, ये 2 बाइनरीज हैं, शायद वही बाइनरीज यहाँ काम कर रही थी और इसको जो है टू नेशन थ्योरी नाम दे दिया गया, टू फूल अस। इस पे आप क्या कहना चाहोगे अंगद भाई, फिर उसके बाद वीबी दादा, उसके बाद रावण दादा।
धन्यवाद। आपने जो प्रश्न पूछा है, टू नेशन थ्योरी का जो लॉलीपॉप है, इसके बारे में आपने पूछा है। अब प्रैक्टिकलिटी आप जब ऑडिट करोगे तो एक चीज आपके सामने आएगी। टू नेशन थ्योरी को इम्प्लीमेंट करके जो जघन्य हत्याकांड एग्जीक्यूट किए, मतलब जब तक ये थ्योरी प्रैक्टिकलिटी में इम्प्लीमेंटेड नहीं थी तो समाज ठीक था। वो जो उनका क्या फ्रीडम मूवमेंट हो रहा था, डन हो रहा था उसका, किंतु हत्याकांड नरसंहार नहीं हो रहे थे। इसको इम्प्लीमेंट किया तो इतने लेवल पे नरसंहार हत्याकांड हुए। इसको मैं 2 तरीके से लेता हूं। पहला, एक तो आप सही कह रहे हैं कि हाँ, इनका धर्म और मजहब के आधार पे देश को टुकड़े करे गए, ठीक है, जिसके लिए लोग एग्री नहीं थे। किंतु एक इसकी कॉन्स्पिरेसी में ये भी समझता हूं कि ब्रिटिशर्स क्रिश्चियन कम्युनिटी का एक बहुत बड़ा प्रोपेगेंडा रहता है कि वो जब किसी जगह से छोड़ के जाते हैं तो उस जगह के लोग इतिहास से सबक लेकर अपना रिटालिएट नहीं करें, तो इसलिए वो उस जगह के व्यक्तियों को आपस में लड़वा के उसमें इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, सो दैट फॉरएवर वो अपने लड़ाई में ऑक्यूपाइड रहे और वो उनके ब्रिटिशर्स के अगेंस्ट कभी नहीं आए। सिमिलर उन्होंने प्रैक्टिकली ये जो ब्लैक पीपल हैं उनके अगेंस्ट करते थे, उन्हें जैसे ब्लैक को, निग्रोस को रिकॉग्नाइज कर रखा था, उनको भी उन्हें आपस में ही ब्रेक किया, सो दैट जो रियल कल्प्रिट है उनके पीछे कभी नहीं आए। तो ये इसका पूरा था। और जो हत्याकांड हुआ, इनके दोषियों को तो पकड़ना चाहिए और ठीक करना चाहिए उन्हीं के घर में जाके।
जी वीवी दादा, सेम
नमस्कार।
क्वेश्चन टू नेशन। नमस्कार दादा, चांस फर्स्ट। सेम क्वेश्चन आपके लिए है कि टू नेशन थ्योरी ये जो है दारुल इस्लाम दारुल हर्ब ही है, और टू नेशन थ्योरी सिर्फ एक कैमोफ्लेज है हमें बेवकूफ़ बनाने के लिए, या सचमुच ही टू नेशन थ्योरी है अलग से?
नहीं, अभी जो आप लोगों ने पूरा पढ़ा, मैं उसको सुन रहा था, तो सैयद अहमद खान का जो विचार था वो क्या था कि जो मुस्लिम्स हैं, वो मुस्लिम जो कम्युनिटी है उसने हिंदुस्तान में उनके हिसाब से, सैयद अहमद खान के हिसाब से, उन्होंने करीब 800 साल तक यहाँ पे राज किया है। और उनके कुरान में लिखा हुआ है कि कोई भी मुस्लिम जो होता है वो मुस्लिम राजा के ही द्वारा राज मतलब शासित होगा और किसी के थ्रू शासित नहीं होगा। तो उनको ये था कि अगर इंडिया इंडिपेंडेंट हो जाएगा और हमारी जो कल्चरल आइडेंटिटी है वो सब अलग है, हमारा रिलीजियस आइडेंटिटी अलग है, हमारी सोशल आइडेंटिटी अलग है, तो हम लोग इसके साथ में रह नहीं सकते। उस बेसिस पर उसने उसको उस थ्योरी को प्रोपाउंड किया था और उसी में वो आगे चले हैं। तो कुछ भी आप कहो कि आप अलग हो, ये वो अलग है, वो तो अपने आप को अलग मानते हैं ना। आपको तो बोलते हैं 9.5 में कि जहां भी काफिर मिले उसको मार डालो, तो वो तुम्हारे
लेकिन
साथ
दादा
सह
अगर
सकते।
सिर्फ इतना ही रीजन था तो सऊदी से फतवा लेने की क्या जरूरत थी कि हिंदुस्तान दारुल इस्लाम है?
तो फिर क्या, अगर वो दारुल इस्लाम बोलेगा तभी तो जाकर के वहां पे जितने भी यहाँ पे कन्वर्टेड है वो मानेंगे ना कि हाँ भाई ठीक है, ये हमारी जगह है। देखो सीधी बात तो ये है कि जितने भी यहाँ पर ईरानियन आए थे या अफगानिस्तानी आए थे, वो तो बाहर वाले थे, उनको तो या तो मार दिया गया या तो कैसे भी करके दे वर एलिमिनेटेड। तो जितने भी यहाँ पे बचे हैं, जो बचे थे उस समय भी, जिस समय हमारे यहाँ पर देश के टुकड़े हो रहे थे, उस समय भी तो जो कन्वर्टेड थे ना, जो हिंदू से कन्वर्ट हुए थे, बहुत से कन्वर्ट थे, वही लोग थे ना। तो उनके दिमाग में घुसड़ना है ना कि हाँ भाई ठीक है, हम ये चीज मांग रहे हैं एंड ये जो चीज है वो अल्लाह पाक की और मोहम्मद साहब की देन है। तभी तो उसको दारुल इस्लाम बोला कि ठीक है, हम अगर पाकिस्तान बनाएंगे वो नया मक्का होगा, वो एशिया का मक्का होगा। ये दिमाग में घुसा के रखा था ना उनके, तभी तो उन लोगों ने सपोर्ट किया। जो सोशल चर्निंग हुई थी, जो इन्होंने एजुकेशन के थ्रू अलीगढ़ मुस्लिम यूनिवर्सिटी में जो इन्होंने वो सोशल चर्निंग किया और बाकी जो इंजीनियरिंग किया उसमें, तभी तो सारे यूपी के मुसलमानों ने और बिहार के मुसलमानों ने, वेस्ट बंगाल के मुसलमानों ने, तमिलनाडु के मुसलमानों ने, कर्नाटक, वो गए नहीं, बात अलग है, लेकिन सबने तभी तो वोट दिया था। ये है। तो टू नेशनल थ्योरी वाज इनग्रेन्ड इन द ब्लड ऑफ मुस्लिम्स और स्पेशली कन्वर्टेड मुस्लिम्स, कि हमको अगर राज करेगा तो कोई हमारे ऊपर मुसलमान ही राज करेगा और किसी को हम राज करने देंगे नहीं। ये उनके दिमाग में।
जी एक वीडियो मैंने लिंक ये डाला है, ये इसको आप लोग जरूर देखिएगा या फिर चला के देखिए। अभी
मैं वो रिएक्शन दे दूं
नाम बदल के क्यों आया तुम? नाम बदल के क्यों आया तुम? ये क्या ब्रिज कुमारी करके आया क्या? तुम लड़की बन गया, कन्वर्ट कर दिया क्या, सेक्स हो गया क्या? ये
बिरजू कुमार है, बिरजू।
अच्छा, मैं कुमारी पढ़ रहा था। अच्छा कुमारी, कुमार है, हाँ बिरजू कुमार है।
जो ब्रज में रहे वही बिरजू।
तो ये बताओ, इंडिया वाला ये नाम क्यों बदला यहाँ पर? यहाँ पे नाम बदलने का क्या मतलब था? तुम अपना नाम लेके आओ।
9 बौद्धों के चैनल में गया था डंडा करने।
अच्छा
रावण दादा, सेम
अभी होता क्या है, देख अवगढ़, प्रॉब्लम ये होती है, हम तुमको जानते हैं, हम तो तुम्हारे को अवगढ़ ही बोलेंगे, तुम चाहे ब्रिजू कुमार करो चाहे तुम
कोई बात नहीं दादा,
कुछ भी करो। तो
दादा
निखिल बोलेंगे, वो कुछ भी नाम रखे यहाँ पर, तो जो नाम आना है तो उसी नाम।
दादा मैं आया तो मैंने तुरंत बोला मैं भाई अवगढ़ हूँ, बिरजू।
अरे आवाज से मालूम पड़ जाता है यार कि तुम अवगढ़ हो, उसमें क्या है। अब ये बनकर के आए, मणिकर्णिका बनकर के आए तो क्या है, हम तो निखिल ही बोलेंगे ना इनको, कितना भी।
दादा आप आपके रॉ ऑफिसर को ऐसी चिल्ला के एक्सपोज कर देते तो हमारा रॉ ऑफिसर है वह रॉ ही रहेगा, हम यूएसए में होंगे तो भी आप हमको हमारे नाम से डांटोगे।
असल में दादा ये जो बंटवारा जो अब चर्चा हो रही है, ये खेल है सब आइडियोलॉजिकल संवर्जन का। जो मैंने ये लिंक दिया है वीडियो का, इसमें बहुत ही बेहतरीन तरीके से समझाया गया है कि किस तरह से उठा पटक करके एक नई शासन व्यवस्था और पूरा कंट्रोल्ड पावर सिर्फ कुछ लोगों के हाथ में रहे। तो
ठीक है, ये वाला देखते हैं। और
इस्लाम
रावण
तो
दादा से
पूरा,
एक कमेंट।
जी जी, इंडियन ट्रू जी, इस्लाम तो पूरा इसी पे कि टोटलिटेरियन रिजीम पे विश्वास करता है। कुछ लोग उसके मालिक रहे, जैसे कि मुल्ला मौलवी और इनकी तबलीगी जमात। ये आज भी जो असर जो 80% मुसलमान है, वो बहुत ही मतलब कोई उसकी अच्छी कंडीशन में नहीं रह रहा है वो।
अशराफ क्लास।
हाँ, अशराफ क्लास, बाकी को शोषण। और जबकि जो इंडिक सिविलाइजेशन है, जो धार्मिक रिलीजन है, इनमें तो स्वतंत्रता है, पूरा बटा हुआ सामंतवादी का सिस्टम है, और हर एक इंसान को पावर मतलब अपने हिसाब से क्या कहते हैं, अर्जित करने के लिए, कुछ भी रहने के लिए चीजें
सही
बनी हुई
मायने
हैं।
में सेकुलरिज्म का जो वो है ना ऑल्टरनेटिव,
हाँ
ठीक है, वो सनातन है। जो कि जो हमारे रिलीजियस लीडर है, उनका सिर्फ इतना काम है कि राजा शासन अच्छे से चलाए, बस ये देखते रहना, चलाना नहीं,
ये
देखते रहना।
इंडियन ट्रू जी, ये वीडियो जरा चलाइए 5-10 मिनट,
हाँ,
जो
मैं
मैंने
1 मिनट
लिंक।
रावण दादा से एक कमेंट ले लूं दादा, 2 मिनट में सेम क्वेश्चन वही
नहीं,
टू
वो
नेशन
वीडियो चला
थ्योरी
दे ना, वीडियो चला
चला
दे,
दूं।
वीडियो चला। हाँ
ठीक है दादा।
हाँ।
अच्छा, इंडियन ट्रू जी, जो मैं ये लास्ट में बोल रहा था, हमें कम से कम 10 से 20 हजार के बीच में गुरुकुल खोलने चाहिए, और 5-6 यूनिवर्सिटीज, और जिसमें कि ये पूरा इंडियन गुरुकुल पद्धति और इंडियन जितने फिलोसफीज हैं ये पढ़ानी चाहिए। और ये जो इस्लामिक आइडियोलॉजी है, मदरसा आइडियोलॉजी, कम्युनिस्ट और ये जो क्रिश्चियन है, इन सब के बारे में उनको इनग्रेन करना चाहिए, ताकि वो जो निकले, जो आईएएस वाईएएस बने, जाके नेता राजनेता जो इंडियन वो क्या कहते हैं उसको, ब्यूरोक्रेसी में जाए, तो वो उनके दिमाग में ये मोटिवेशन रहे देश के लिए। अभी जो जाते हैं वो तो इतना आईएएस कोचिंग इंस्टीट्यूट में ये दिव्य कीर्ति लोग तो पूरा एंटी हिंदू, एंटी इंडियन सिविलाइजेशन पूरा पढ़ाते हैं वो लोग, तो वैसे भी उनकी हमदर्दी नहीं रहती।
कंपैरेटिव रिलीजियस एजुकेशन।
मैं कुछ बोलूं इस बारे में अवगढ़?
जी जी, बोलिए 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 दादा, आप जरूर बोलिए दादा।
इसमें क्या होता है कि जो हमारे यूपीएससी के जो सिलेबस है ना, उस सिलेबस में जो सबसे बड़ा जो इम्पोर्टेंट रोल प्ले करता है वो जनरल स्टडीज प्ले करता है। और जनरल स्टडीज को पढ़ने के लिए जो यूपीएससी की तैयारी कर रहा होता है, सिविल सर्विस की तैयारी कर रहा होता है, उसको एनसीईआरटी की बुक्स पढ़नी पड़ती है। और एनसीईआरटी की बुक्स वही हैं जो अभी मनमोहन सिंह ने या पहले वालों ने लिखी हुई, उसको हमारी मोदी गवर्नमेंट ने ज्यादा चेंज नहीं किया है। अब
हाँ, हर साल थोड़ा नहीं, एक चीज मुझे नहीं समझ में, ये थोड़ा थोड़ा हर साल क्या चेंज करें, फटाक से चेंज करें। पिछले साल कुछ चेंज किए थे, फिर इस साल थोड़ा चेंज किए हैं।
अरे यार, तुम समझते नहीं हो। फिर बात प्रदीप, फिर बात चली जाती है, वो चूतिया बैठा है ना वहां पर सुप्रीम कोर्ट में, गधा। हर बात को लेकर सुप्रीम कोर्ट में चले जाते हैं, हर बात को लेकर चले जाएंगे। हमारी जो इंडियन फिलोसफी है, हमारी जो इंडियन सोसाइटी है, उसको चेंज कर रहा है, ये कर रहा है, वो कर रहा है, कुछ भी कर देंगे ना ये लोग। वहां पे तो बैठे हुए ना अभिषेक मान सिंह के चमचे लोग।
सिस्टम
समझ गया।
आप जो बोल रहे हो कि हाँ ठीक है, गवर्नमेंट जो तुम बोल रहे हो कि गवर्नमेंट के पास में इतने फीलर नहीं है, उनके तो पूरा पूरा देश चलाना है। पर समस्या ये है कि वो एक जुडिशरी नाम की जो चीज बैठी हुई है, वो हर बात में डंडा करती है। आज कितना डंडा किया उसने, डीजीपी मणिपुर को बुला लिया, बोला 7 अगस्त को आके खड़े हो जाओ यहाँ पे। तुमने किया क्या है? उसको सिर्फ मणिपुर दिख रहा है, उसको वेस्ट बंगाल नहीं दिखता, उसको कहीं नहीं दिखता। अभी मेवात में तमाशा हुआ है, नूह में तमाशा हो गया पूरा पूरा। 3 दिन से तैयारी करके बैठे हुए थे, मतलब 3 दिन से ये लफड़ा करके बैठे हुए थे, और कम से कम 6 महीने से तैयारी करके बैठे होंगे कि अब की बार अगर जुलूस आएगा तो हम इसको रोकेंगे। तो समस्या ये है कि जब तक जुडिशरी को आप नहीं पर्ज करोगे, पर्जिंग होनी चाहिए, स्ट्रॉन्ग पर्जिंग ऑफ द जुडिशरी। आज मेरे ख्याल में बंगाल के वो अभिषेक गांगुली ने कुछ किया ना दादा,
जी जी,
भयंकर ऑर्डर दिया उसने, हालत खराब हो गई टीएमसी की। तो ऐसे जजेस आने चाहिए सर। जब तक ये बैठा हुआ ना, अभी साल भर के लिए तो आप भूल जाओ, 2014 नवंबर तक, 2024 नवंबर तक तो भूल ही जाओ कि कुछ होगा यहाँ पर। ये हर बात में उंगली करेगा ये वो।
दादा यही सेम चीज हुई थी ये शाहीन बाग वाले केस में। जुडिशरी उछल के पहुंच गई, हम बात करेंगे, ये करेंगे, उन्होंने मुंह पे थूक के भेज दिया।
और उसमें भी मालूम है जो उनकी कमेटी बनाई थी, उसमें कौन कौन से बनाया था? वो एक हेगड़े गधा है, एंटी मुस्लिम, एंटी हिंदू लाइक एनीथिंग, वो हेगड़े करके है एक वकील, उसको लेकर के बैठा रखा था उन्होंने। तो
जी दादा,
अभी
फिर
ये
मैं
है
दिखाऊं?
जो आप जो चला रहे हो, हम मेरा मतलब ये है, मैं अपनी स्ट्रीम को चलाने का मतलब ये नहीं होता कि मुझे कुछ पैसे चाहिए या कुछ और चाहिए। मुझे ये है कि सोशल अवेकनिंग धीरे धीरे करके ग्राउंड लेवल पर अगर औगड़ा ने जाकर के 10 लोगों को बताया कि इन मुसलमानों ने देश को आजाद टुकड़े करने के चक्कर में वो जो टू नेशन थ्योरी बनाई थी वो किस बेसिस पे बनाई थी, अगर वो पब्लिक के पास पहुंचेगी, कुछ नहीं शाम के टाइम में वैसे ही खाना खाने के बाद में बैठे हो अपने बाबा के साथ दादा के साथ में कुछ अगर बात करोगे उनके दिमाग में भी घुसेगा ना, जरूरी थोड़ा कि वो सिलेबस में आए, ऐसा है।
जी दादा, अब वो मैं प्ले करता हूँ।
जी जी प्ले करिए अब उसको, फिर हम लोग बाद में करेंगे। एक
ये क्या है, कहीं ऐसा तो नहीं मेरे पर स्ट्राइक आ जाएगी, क्योंकि मेरे को स्ट्राइक बहुत मिल रही है बिना मतलब तुमने ये किया हुआ तुमने वो किया करते रहते हैं लोग।
ये सिंह साहब एक काम करो ना, लाइव बंद करो।
हाँ,
नहीं, मैं ये
ऑफलाइन दिखा
बोल रहा हूँ कि जो आपने किया ना खत्म, उसमें जितना भी आपको समझ में आया है इसके आगे भी मतलब इज इट एसेंशियल कि आगे वाला भी हम पढ़े? अलीगढ़ मूवमेंट बहुत जरूरी है पढ़ना, कम से कम पब्लिक को मालूम पड़ना चाहिए कि देश के मतलब टुकड़े होने का सबसे बड़ा जो कारण था वो यही गधा था, साला सैयद नालायक।
जी दादा, लेकिन वो 33 पेजेस थे तो मैंने कहा आज नहीं हो पाएगा,
नहीं
उसको
वो
एक
मैं
एक करके ले।
आई एम नॉट कंटेस्टिंग दैट, मेरे को ये है कि इस पूरे चैप्टर को पूरा करना है। इसमें जो
जी
अफगानी
दादा,
है ना, वहां जो अफगानियों का रोल है उनका भी आना चाहिए, लास्ट में अफगानियों का रोल भी आ रहा है, उन्होंने भी रोल अदा किया था इसमें। वो साले
जी दादा,
यहाँ पे रहते नहीं थे फिर भी उन्होंने यहाँ पे उंगली की थी बेवकूफों ने। तो इसको बंद
दादा वो
करते
तो
हैं, स्ट्रीम को 2 घंटे हो गए हैं और बाद में फिर अपना
जी
जो अवगढ़ दिखा रहे हैं उसको देखते हैं। रावण साहब के भी थोड़ा सा क्या बोलते हैं संभाषण सुनेंगे और हम लोग अपना आपस में एक्सचेंज करेंगे जैसा यूजुअल करते हैं। 2 घंटे हो गए, स्ट्रीम बहुत हो गई, बस कर।
जी
स्ट्रीम
दादा,
बंद करो,
तो
स्ट्रीम
मैं
बंद करो।
इसको क्लोजिंग की तरफ ले जा रहा हूँ।
हम्म,
सभी दर्शकों का जो है हमें समय देने के लिए धन्यवाद। इसके अगले संस्करण के साथ पुनः आपके सम्मुख प्रस्तुत होंगे और आपसे रिक्वेस्ट है कि हमारे इस कंटेंट को लाइक करें, शेयर करें, सब्सक्राइब करें। ठीक है, थोड़ा सा हमें डिटेल में
लाइक कर
पढ़ना
देंगे
पड़ता
तो
है।
अच्छा रहेगा। लाइक करने से होता है क्या है कि उसको जो यूट्यूब का एल्गोरिथम है ना उसको पकड़ लेता है, फिर वो अपने आप जब कोई चैनल देख रहा होता है तो वहां पर उसको डालता है, जबरदस्ती बोलता है इसको भी देख लो, इसको भी देख लो, ऐसा होता है।
हाँ, उसको थोड़ा सा उसकी जो है रीच बढ़ाता है
हाँ,
लाइक्स के बेस पे, वही इसका जो है क्राइटेरिया है। तो इसको लाइक करें, शेयर करें, सब्सक्राइब करें, कमेंट अवश्य अवश्य करें, आगे क्या कंटेंट देखना चाहते हैं वो भी हमें बताएं ताकि वैसा भी कंटेंट हम लेके आए। और इसके साथ हम इसका समापन करते हैं, अगले संस्करण के साथ पुनः उपस्थित होंगे। तब तक जय हिंद, वंदे मातरम, भारत माता की जय।
जी, जय हिंद, वंदे मातरम, भारत माता की जय।
हर हर महादेव।